Klaus, a member of the Woodville Mage Corps, froze in stunned silence. The words echoed around the room, "You are dismissed." He was ordered to find out why. Commander Fowl, sitting at the table, calmly explained that Klaus simply did not realize how powerful the magical core was. He stated that a mage who only knows how to heal is not needed in battle. The commander looked at him contemptuously while Klaus protested, insisting that he had significantly helped with his healing spells, even created new spells, and that his abilities were true combat magic. Despair grew. He begged that he only had to hold on for another 6 months until his younger sister Karen finished evening academy. The commander's face twisted with contempt. He spat, called Klaus a talentless mage full of resentment, and said that he should be grateful for having served the full term. These harsh words struck Klaus. He froze, eyes wide open, and was left speechless. Sitting down, he turned and walked away. The heavy door of the commander's office slammed behind him, hiding his face. As he retreated down the corridor, the last fierce order from the commander echoed from the room, "Get out." The word talentless would not leave him alone. He remembered the day when monsters killed his parents and left him alone with his sister Karen, how he joined the Mage Corps so she wouldn't have to fight, how they rejoiced when he was accepted, and how that hope now shattered. That day when he was called, he joined the Corps and stepped before the assembly. His name was announced: Klaus Finley. It was noted that his magical power was the highest in the history of the Corps, and because of this, great hopes were placed on his future. To determine his affinity, he was ordered to place his hands on a crystal ball, and the question hung in the air: would his power manifest as black offensive magic or as red supportive magic? When he directed his energy, the sphere did not turn black or red. Instead, it exploded with dazzling golden light, and Commander Fowl, stunned by the unexpected color, sharply ordered him to pour even more power into the crystal. From this incredible power emerged 3 separate magical directions: healing, ice, and fire. But this spectacular display of power turned out to be deceptive. He felt a bitter realization. Despite enormous reserves of magic, the only spell he could truly use was the simplest healing one. This limitation defined his entire career. Commander Fowl openly announced his appointment, a decision that stunned the other mages. Klaus was sent to the infirmary, although the commander assured everyone that his salary and provisions would be sufficient. After the announcement, he threw a dull, simple mantle at Klaus. The commander declared that such lack of talent was unworthy of the red or black mantle of a true mage. This simple mantle was clear proof of his failure. So for the next 5 years, this was his reality. Lonely, he stood by the window and recalled all his efforts. He developed ways to adapt healing magic for combat, but no one listened to his ideas. He belonged to no faction and became an outcast in the very heart of the community he had joined with such great hopes. He announced that he was returning to the healing room, but was met by the sharp voice of Tamara, the head of the institution. She demanded to know where he had been and ordered him to hurry because an emergency had occurred. She pointed him to a patient with her face wrapped in bandages. A man named Rindami said that she was attacked by a client in a brothel and suffered a terrible burn. Despite first aid, he feared a scar would remain, and seeing the extent of the injury, Klaus agreed to try to heal her. He placed his hand on the woman's face, and a complex, glowing, magical symbol materialized on his palm as he uttered the healing spell. Rindami could not hide his amazement, having never seen such a pattern. Klaus addressed the patient, asked if she could hear him, and promised a full recovery. When the light of the spell faded, he whispered to the woman that she could open her eyes, recalled his lonely studies, and realized that this was a type of healing magic he had invented himself, and her eyes opened wide in surprise as she saw her reflection. She touched her perfectly restored skin, a sincere relief and gratitude on her face. She thanked him, and Klaus smiled warmly, knowing in his mind that this moment was what he valued most when his magic returned smiles to people. His satisfaction instantly faded when Tamara addressed him directly and confessed. Although she wanted to remain silent for Commander Fowl's sake, now no one could deny Klaus's healing power surpassed hers, and nearby the patient and Rindami joyfully celebrated her miraculous recovery. Rindami returned to him, his face serious, and asked what kind of magic could have caused such a wound. This question brought to mind the image of Commander Fowl 5 years ago, bathing in luxury, spending core funds for personal gain and neglecting his duties. The memory struck Klaus with bitter truth. Now he understood that Commander Fowl meant him supposedly a useless member of the Corps. All this time, while he worked diligently, Fowl merely amused himself, pretending to be interested in his reports, but in reality just killing time. He turns to the treatment room, anxiety visible on his face, and asks Tamara why the commander called him. Tamara firmly squeezes his hand, irritation visible on her face. She says she has been silent too long while he was deceived, and warns that any protest now will only worsen his situation. He is being dismissed. When the weight of this news sinks in, the now recovered patient bows low, thanking him for 5 years of help. He looks at her with a weak, painful smile, accepting that he will no longer be able to use his healing magic within these walls. He turned and walked away, year after year. He and Tamara were the only 2 mages in their neglected dwelling, tirelessly working night after night to keep the treatment room operational. He walked the quiet streets under the moonlight, sighing heavily. He sincerely believed that his healing magic would finally be recognized as necessary. When he returned home, he was greeted by the cheerful voice of his sister, Karen. She warmly welcomed him and said she had just come back and was already preparing dinner for them. Her joyful mood clashes with his gloomy expression. He asks her to sit down, saying that they need to talk. After explaining what happened, he sits with his head down and apologizes, calling himself a worthless brother. Karen immediately rejects his self-pity and insists that this is not true at all. Her words throw Klaus back into years of memories. He recalls his relentless practice of healing magic, how he used it in adventures to overcome beasts and the countless people he healed as a healer. He remembers both defeats and the patience that slipped through his hands. Even then, their families thanked him for his efforts until the very end. This memory weighs heavily on him. Seeing his expression, Karen insists that he has nothing to apologize for and firmly says that she always knew he gives himself completely. She continues, saying that if his previous workplace did not suit him, he should simply find another. Klaus only quietly agrees, still uncertain. In her head, options race, each thought running faster than the previous one. She asks about the guild, directly pointing to the Black Falcon Guild Hall. She suggests he take requests for taming monsters, confident that the guild master, a man named Ursel, will look after him. He expresses doubt, but she instantly interrupts him and soothes him with a bright smile. Everything will be fine. The smile broadens on her face as she unequivocally says that her brother is both strong and cool. To put a full stop, she declares that she will personally vouch for him, and her unconditional faith momentarily leaves Klaus speechless, a light blush flaring on his cheeks. He recalls Karen's unwavering support. She, tying her hair, decisively says she will study hard at the Knights Academy and asks everyone to try together. Her encouragement was always his anchor, even on those days when others said he was talentless and he felt broken. His thoughts again carry him to those days after his parents' death. Karen found him then, and her smile has since become a constant salvation for him. Returning to reality, he offers to help in the kitchen. Karen refuses, saying he must be tired, but he insists. He wants to cook with her, and a warm smile blooms on her face because she thinks to herself that he is her son. A quiet moment of shared happiness strengthens his resolve. He wants to build a happy life with Karen, and when night falls on their home, he knows what he must do to achieve it. The next day at the Adventurers Guild, Black Falcon, Guildmaster Ursel, not believing what he heard, asked aloud in front of everyone, "Dismissed, Klaus." Ursel shifts his gaze to Klaus sitting opposite, admits his foolishness because Klaus had always used only healing magic. He never cared about his other abilities. Then Ursel offers Klaus to register in the guild, and stunned Klaus asks if this is a sincere offer. Ursel leaned forward with an ironic smile and said that the guild is a business, and for a problematic boy like Klaus, they prepared a special main registration exam and he will have to pass it. He pushed a paper across the table and in a quiet but firm voice explained, if previously a temporary registration was enough, now a main one is required. Without it, official requests are not accepted and there is no confirmation of his skills. This document, he says, is exactly for that exam, and Klaus took it, resolutely said, "I understand," and thanked him. He accepted the conditions of the guild master Ursula. She explained that the exam would essentially be a request for a rank demotion, and the rank Klaus would ultimately receive would be decided after his return. With a determined smile, Klaus confirmed that he understood and immediately set off. On the way, he stopped, closed his eyes, and clasped his hands to concentrate. He decided to give his all from the very beginning and mentally activated a whole series of powerful skills: regeneration for automatic recovery and enhancement, limit break to surpass the body's capabilities, divine awakening and cell rejuvenation, and a soft pulse of energy spread from him. His senses sharpened and he decisively stepped into the dense forest. The goal was the fire lizard, a creature he had already fought, and he was confident he could find it thanks to his magic sense. Suddenly, a dazzling flash of light burst from the depths of the trees and a dull rumble sounded. The light hit something. But when he looked closer, he froze. A wave of confusion overwhelmed him. His surprise turned into anxiety. Before him was not a simple fire lizard but a monstrous black salamander, a beast of rank AS. He felt its incredible power, far stronger than the strength of his target, and realized that its magic seemed to be composed of the powers of several people combined, so he wondered if it was already fighting someone. The destructive power of the monster was obvious. In the clearing below, Klaus saw the aftermath of the attack. A party of adventurers lay scattered and defeated, and he was stunned to realize that only one person stood against the one he now suspected to be a rank S monster. Without hesitation, he sprang into action as the black salamander's attack was momentarily stopped by an invisible force. Klaus began weaving a spell. A glowing seal ignited between his hands, and he decided to use his magic to divert the creature from the sole survivor. He gathers his spirit, sees the enormous size of the creature, but feels confident. All his training in healing magic against monsters had prepared him for this, and he rushed forward, closing the distance to the beast. Reaching the creature, he strikes its hide with his palms. A shining magical symbol flares under his hands, and he pours his power directly into the monster's bloodstream, aiming to instantly cool it and freeze it from within. It activates instantly and fiercely. Ice explodes all over the salamander's body, and it shatters into icy fragments. When the icy explosion subsides, he is still crouching, having unleashed his most powerful technique, extreme blood freezing. He stands up, wipes a drop of sweat from his forehead, and looks at the smoking, frozen remains of a high-rank monster. A wave of relief washes over him. He did it. He notices the only survivor from the previous group, a young woman who looks at him with wide-open eyes and cannot utter a word. He approaches, says he will take the proof of the monster's subjugation, and only then asks if she is okay. He apologized for scaring her, explained that in the middle of the exam he also needed proof of subjugation, asked permission to take the monster's magic stone, and the stunned woman only managed to quiet. When he turns away, a clear thought suddenly pierces the woman. She looks at his back and wonders if he is the legendary one, known only as the Magic Emperor. Returning to the guild after the registration exam and during the task to subdue a fire lizard, Klaus was suddenly met by a stunned Karen. She shouted his name, not believing he had returned so quickly. In a large crystal lies the preserved body of a black salamander, and he says that he defeated the black salamander itself, not the fire lizard, and fears that because of this discrepancy he might not be allowed to proceed. Guildmaster Ursel examined Credence and said that this was by no means a failure. On the contrary, he announced that Klaus passed and deserves an S rank in the guild. Klaus, looking at the adventurer's rank table, pointed to himself in complete disbelief and could not understand how he could even be S a level just below the highest. Throughout the country, only a handful have SS rank, so for most, S is effectively the peak. He pressures Klaus, demanding an explanation of how he managed to defeat an S rank monster alone. And interrupts. Her expression is serious. She emphasizes that to defeat an S rank black salamander alone and return so quickly is, by any measure, an incredible feat. He agrees. Although the exam was for a lower rank, what he actually did practically places him in S rank. He says it is unusual, but the main thing is the result. His face darkened as he reviewed the task details. He realized they specifically asked for the black salamander and that the information was deliberately misleading. He feared that other adventurers might have suffered a terrible fate and that the entire request was rigged. Klaus stepped back from the counter and walks alone down a long, silent corridor. Here they thanked him, but in the Magic Corps he was considered talentless and no one even wanted to hear what he had to say. Next to the guild master stood Ursel and Karen, looking at him thoughtfully. Ursel noticed that this guild was organized differently, and Klaus, flipping through the registration book, asked which profession to write down, pondering aloud whether magic swordsman would be an inappropriate choice. In response, Ursel explained that a vague title like magic swordsman could be confusing when forming partis authors would not know whether his skills were closer to supportive red magic or offensive black magic. Continuing the explanation and turning the book, Ursel said that because of this, Klaus would have to be registered differently. The young adventurer listened, his face serious, waiting for a decision. He raised his eyes with a bright smile and suggested simply creating a new profession for him, and Klaus shuddered, stunned by such an unexpected proposal. His surprise lasted while Ursel explained that there are no strict rules in professions. He recalled that in his time, even the magic swordsman class did not exist when he was an active adventurer. He gave an example. Aaron, the current leader of the Holy Knights, was initially recorded simply as a knight, but his holy nature turned out to be astonishingly powerful and became his defining trait, shaping his reputation and role. Applying this logic, Ursel noticed that the power of the blue mantle heals, and asked in surprise why a holy knight would need such an ability. Klaus's eyes slightly widened at this hint. He realized the mighty healing magic he once possessed was unparalleled for his old role. Ursel instantly seized the moment and proposed the new title Blue Mage Swordsman. Karen agreed that it suited him, and Klaus, filled with new enthusiasm, consented and asked to be recorded under this profession. He looks at his new guild card and a wave of recognition washes over him. When he was ordered to gather equipment, he understood. The profession that was once a sign of his ineptitude now belonged only to him. When he goes outside, Karen's radiant, joyful face appears before him. She runs to him, clenching her hands in excitement, and congratulates her brother on officially joining the guild. Later, already at home, he explained that although he dreamed of joining the S-rank Magic Swordsman division, his new title allows him to take on special orders, and Karen brushed off all doubts. It was quite natural for his true abilities, and she added that Blue Magic Swordsman sounds very cool. She shines and says that this profession is just for him. Her steadfast support touches him, and he quietly thanks her. To celebrate, they sit at a table full of food, give thanks together, and only then begin the meal. He enthusiastically praises the delicious food, notes that Karen, although busy with studying, always finds time to cook for him, and once again sincerely thanks her for her kindness. His enthusiasm ignites a spark, and he announces that tomorrow he will be the one to cook for her. Karen looks up, surprised, and asks if he is serious. Her surprise instantly turned into pure delight. She eagerly requested a portion of pork steak and also suggested buying a strawberry tart to truly celebrate his acceptance into the guild. The next morning at Guild Hall, Klaus cheerfully greets the receptionist with "Good morning." She notices his elevated mood and he laughs, admitting that it is not only because of the delicious food. She smiles and says that since he officially joined, orders have been pouring in one after another. She encourages him, saying that with him on the team, the guild's reputation will quickly rise. He looks at her with determination, a slight blush on his cheeks, and assures her that he will do everything in his power, especially now that his abilities have been recognized. His sincerity embarrasses her. She exclaims that he shouldn't speak like that with that expression on his face, and admits that it makes her want to hug him. She quickly composed herself and apologized for her outburst. Winking, she handed him the task for the day, a request only for S-rank adventures, which greatly surprised him. The task describes the target adamantite, a magical creature with an incredibly hard shell, impenetrable defense, and colossal physical strength, living on Crane Mountain to the west of the capital. The power of Crane Mountain adamantite defeated. Klaus stands nearby, marveling at how much his sense of magic has improved. He realizes that now he can sense the approximate magical power of the entire country and decides to return. As he turns to leave, the ground suddenly begins to tremble violently. Stunned, he momentarily wonders if it is an earthquake, and at that moment feels an unknown, powerful magic arise from nowhere. He found himself face to face with the source of that immense power, a colossal reptilian beast with a shell like a mountain of stone. It loomed over him, and its presence was oppressive. When the creature bowed its head, a piercing cold suddenly filled the air. He noticed its glowing red eyes and realized with fear that it was not an ordinary adamantine. The monster let out a deafening roar. It became even wider. Panic gripped him. He did not understand how he could fight such a force and felt completely powerless. Then it released a stream of icy air from its jaws, and the ground around it instantly froze in ice. It recoiled from the biting cold. He froze, looking at the ruins and admiring the power of that creature. For the first time in his life, he saw a magical beast and clearly understood, if he did not stop it here, the nearby town would suffer. He had not yet managed to make a plan when the beast lunged. Its gigantic body struck him. The blow was deafening, but in it he felt a strange surge, like a divine awakening. Consciousness began to fade, saw a creature preparing another attack, and realized he must act now before it becomes too late. On his knees, he gathered his last strength and whispered the spell on high heels to fully restore endurance and open his magic circus. A powerful surge of energy rushed through him, and his hands lit up. He felt his consciousness beginning to break apart. The world threatened to vanish into darkness. It was a terrifyingly familiar feeling, as if he was stuck in a repeating loop. And just as his vision began to darken, the adamantite monster let out one last painful roar, and its massive body fell heavily to the ground. Its consciousness faded. He was breathing hard, wiping sweat from his forehead, when a wave of relief washed over him. He asked aloud if he was experiencing this moment for the 6th time already. 6th loop. His gaze fell on the remains of a creature that had somehow shrunk to a tiny fraction of its former size. It was still breathing, and he, deciding that it might be an unknown and dangerous being, put it into his bag with belongings for safety. Holding the bag open, he suddenly heard a loud sucking sound and a small creature was sucked inside. He watched with delight as it was completely drawn into the magical embrace of the bag. Having securely caught the strange beast, he returned to the Guild of the Falcon Wing. He knew he had to show this dangerous creature, seemingly carved from adamantite, Ursula, but still did not know where the best place to do so was. He approached the counter and called Jerry. When she turned around, he asked if Ursula was here, and Jerry apologized for the delay and offered to immediately call the guild leader. Soon Ursula appeared. At first he thought Klaus had failed the mission and had not taken live prey. Klaus began to explain, but Ursula interrupted him and asked with complete disbelief if he seriously brought back adamantite, while in the background Jerry thought that this rookie was a new kind of trouble. He explains with a connoisseur's smile that the bag's capacity for items depends on the magical power of its owner and adds that adamantite simply won't fit, and Klaus reacts in shock to H. Patting Klaus on the back, he cheerfully remarked that it was strange, but Klaus even had enough magical power to be in the magical unit at all, and the embarrassed Klaus asked where he should release the creature. In response, Ursula suggests they head to the plains just beyond the castle walls. In a moment, Klaus is on his knees with an open bag for things. Ursula calls him, and a dull rumble comes from that bag. A creature emerges from the bag. Ursula cannot believe his eyes and exclaims that this must be a new species of adamantians. Klaus, all sweaty, asks to wait and does not believe that it is even possible. Ursula's face hardens. He asks again if Klaus is addressing him, Ursula, and without a doubt states that the creature is a monster. Suddenly, he reveals the true essence of the creature behind him. It grows to colossal size, and it is not just a monster but the sacred beast Jinbu, the guardian whom Uroboros sent to protect the world from evil. Somewhere, the heavy stone doors of the ancient ruins creaked open. Could the old seal finally be broken? At the headquarters of the Motto Empire, Aaron, head of the Holy Knights, informs Commander Fowl of alarming news. Healing magic is weakening, the recovery time has sharply lengthened, and worse, some people can no longer be healed at all. Fowl, with a hint of irritation, cut in that the healing part does not concern him and he is not involved in it. He sits at the table grumbling to himself that he is overwhelmed with work and does not understand why the red mages are slacking off. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a subordinate bursting through the door and shouting that it is urgent. The man hurriedly delivers his urgent report. Outside the walls of the royal capital, a horde of monsters is gathering. Howell's disdain melted away instead. His eyes widened in shock as he realized this terrible news. Meanwhile, in the distance, Klaus gazes at the colossal creature resting on the horizon. He quietly confirms what he sees. It is the sacred beast Jinbu. The great beast unfolded and sounded with an ancient, mighty voice, confirming that it is Jinbu, one of the sacred beasts protecting the world of existence from the legends of Uroboros. Uroboros awakens a memory in Klaus. He returns to two children. The girl says that her mother read her a picture book about the demon emperor. The boy adds that it was very cool, and Klaus understands he knows this story. The fairy tale from the illustrated book comes alive in his mind. 1,000 years ago, people lived in fear of monsters, and to save the world, the heavenly demon emperor set out on a long journey to defeat the evil dragon Uroboros. After long travels, he finally met his enemy, and this memory intertwines with the image of the mother reading the same story to the children, whose small silhouettes hide in the shadow of the huge dragon. They recall the end of that story. Unable to destroy the great dragon Uroboros, the demon emperor decided otherwise to seal it. For this, he placed 4 great seals on the 4 sides of the earth and commanded the 4 sacred beasts to guard them forever. The burden of the legend settled in his consciousness. A creature resembling a deer spoke. Its voice sounded with ancient power and confirmed that it was truly Jinbu. Klaus froze, eyes wide open in disbelief at the living. The astonishment was broken by the frantic voice of Ursula, who panicked and shouted, "Why is the creature still not dead?" Klaus calmly replied that he is precisely blocking the flow of its magic. He placed his hands over the beast and cast a spell of forced magic disclosure. A complex web of power lit up between his palms. For them, the creature turned into a huge turtle. Ursula explained that when they found Jinbu, he was in terrible condition with strange red eyes, and the gem on his forehead was pitch black, and he told how they collected good magical stones that helped him recover at least a little. He noticed that Jinbu's eyes were originally black, so there must be a reason for this change. When Ursula was speaking, Klaus suddenly realized, if the guild master is so upset, then he has come across something incredibly serious. And suddenly he was overwhelmed by a deep understanding. This was Jinbu, the sacred beast who healed his shell. As if in response to his thoughts, the colossal turtle turned its long, snake-like neck. Its wise eyes met his silent expression of gratitude that passed between them. He froze in disbelief and blurted out that the creature spoke. Turning to Ursel with wide-open eyes, he asked if sacred beasts can talk. Just as Ursel was about to answer, a voice echoed in Klaus's head and confirmed it. The sacred beast Jinbu acknowledged that he was heard and asked to name the listener. He realized the voice was auditory, but it flowed directly into his thoughts. Gathering himself, he introduced himself as Klaus Finley. Nearby, a worried Ursel asked if everything was all right, to which Klaus quickly replied that there were no problems. Sacred Beast apologized, explaining that he had to return home because his sister was waiting, and added that if Klaus became his master, he would follow him. At that moment, his giant figure shone and began to shrink, compressing into a tiny turtle that fit in the palm, and Klaus almost fell from surprise. Ursel watched the exchange, marveling that Klaus was really talking to the sacred beast, and decided that this must definitely be told and that they should return to the guild. He even assured Klaus that the sacred beast seemed to be fine and that he trusted him specifically. Klaus, looking strange, accepted this responsibility. Later, in a quiet room, on a pillow, a small turtle woke up, slowly opened its eyes. The sacred creature looked at Klaus, who was sitting at a nearby table in simpler clothes, addressed him asking if everything was all right, and worriedly noticed that he had not eaten anything. He gently holds the tiny creature, carefully listening as the sacred beast Jinbu confesses that it was worried about its master's stomach. This is a restlessness it had never felt before, and for the first time its heart was so moved by its master. He looks down at the creature, a drop of sweat on his temple, and it explains that its voice reaches only him because he is its master. He asks if that is the only reason. The sacred beast explains that it had long waited for someone who could hear its voice, the only condition to become its master. It proclaims that Klaus is that person. Instantly understanding arises. Klaus smiles and asks if that means he can now call it master all the time. The creature explains that it had only one master and that cannot be changed. Then it reveals a painful memory. Several hundred years ago, it was separated from its previous master. Suddenly it dawns on him, he was called master only because he healed it. The sacred beast warmly recalls its former master as a wonderful person, and the creature's warm and gentle nature confuses Klaus. He blushes and cannot comprehend how their bond works. He changes the subject and asks the sacred beast why it first went on a rampage. The creature explained that the Ouroboros seal was broken, and the power that escaped drove it mad. Worried about Klaus, it shared important news. His sister, one of the four sacred beasts, sleeps deep in ancient ruins, and it is only a matter of time before she awakens. A vision of a dark entrance to the ruins entwined with thick vines appeared in his mind. He froze in shock when Jinbu explained the arrangement. The four sacred beasts stood in the east, west, south, and north, all centered around the ancient ruins, and Jinbu himself was one of them, sharing his consciousness with the others. This shared consciousness was a safeguard. If the evil dragon resurrects, monsters will flood the world and enslave it, and Jinbu noticed that all this was exactly like in that picture book. The weight of this revelation pressed on him. He wanted to help Karen, but a wave of doubts overwhelmed him. He became a wanderer only for a quiet, peaceful life with her, so what should he do now? His inner storm burst into action. He struck with his fist sharply, and the small turtle-like creature flinched. He said it was not right to be its master. He has a sister to think about. Before he could explain anything, Karen flew into the room with a frightened face and shouted an urgent warning. The Night Academy is in trouble. A huge horde of monsters is approaching the outer walls of the royal capital. Her news stunned him for a moment. Jinbu, settling on a cushion, nudged him. They needed to go. Karen added that Ursel was standing right at the center of the defensive line. Interrupting the conversation, Klaus apologized to Jinbu but insisted on going together. The little creature readily agreed and jumped onto his shoulder. With unwavering determination in their hearts, they rushed to where the crisis was unfolding. The giant stone gates. The situation was extremely dangerous. The horde of monsters, goblins, winged beasts, and even worse creatures poured through the breach and encountered the line of defenders led by Ursel and Lorenzo. Arriving at the scene, they were frozen with horror. The entire area beyond the castle walls teemed with monsters. "This is terrible," whispered Karen, and Klaus, staring at the roaring, grotesque creatures covering the defense, could not believe his eyes. He stood in shock when Lorenzo called him by name and smiled with relief how glad he was to see him. The small creature Ouroboros had settled on his shoulder, and Klaus marveled at this chaos, realizing that it was probably the result of Ouroboros's match. In the command tent, Aaron, leader of the Holy Knights, turned to Ursel and asked who the people who had just arrived were, and Ursel replied that they were Klaus Finley from the Black Falcon Guild and Karen Finley, a knight apprentice. Fowl immediately lunged at him, declaring that he was useless in this situation. Surprised, Klaus asked why he was even brought to the strategic meeting. Nearby, Lorenzo's face twisted with irritation. He was outraged by the contempt shown to his guildmate. He intervened, sharply reminding that Klaus was an S-rank adventurer, not someone who only knew how to heal with magic. Then he turned to Klaus, said he was starting a fight for his sake, and asked him to first explain what was going on. Aaron took the helm of the meeting and briefly outlined the strategy. The capital's forces were divided into two fronts. The first was fighting the main horde of monsters, but a second horde was discovered in the rear, and Aaron noticed that Klaus was positioned with that group. Lorenzo understood that if they could break the rear horde, the first front would immediately become much easier to control. Klaus eagerly offered, "Trust me to handle the bosses together with Aaron's soldiers." Karen looked shocked, and Fowl and Lorenzo stood stunned by his confidence. At the bold statement, Aaron, the leader of the Holy Knights, instantly took command. He declared that together with his knights he would handle the capital, and the others should protect the city from monsters. Addressing the invisible Klaus, Aaron gave the go-ahead, saying that since he defeated the Black Salamander, he could act as he saw fit. He accepted the conditions without hesitation. His face hardened with determination as he grabbed the front of his uniform, and on his shoulder Uroboro watched. His decision was immediately challenged by Karen. She stepped forward and insisted that she would go with him to support him. Klaus initially refused, telling her to return to the city with Ursel, but an unshakable resolve froze on her face. She yielded and allowed her to come on the sole condition that she would be only a medic. Karen gladly accepted his terms. When everything was settled, they headed to the place where the sacred beast Jin Bu was waiting. Klaus called the enormous creature, asked for permission to pass, and seemed to receive consent from the giant turtle-like animal. As they were about to set off, Klaus glanced at the large procession of wounded and homeless people. Their heavy steps echoed all around. Now, sitting together with Karen on the huge shell of Jin Bu and Eren riding alongside, Klaus suddenly ordered to stop. He placed his hands on the shell, and a glowing magical sign began to appear on the ground below. From the seal erupted a gigantic wave of power, a spell called Perfect Healing. It spread out in a huge circle and, like a gentle wave, washed over dozens of wounded with life-giving energy. The spell covered the crowd, leaving behind a trail of sparkling light and a deafening silence. The onlookers could hardly believe their eyes. One man whose wounds had just vanished could not comprehend if he was truly healthy. Another marveled at the scale of the magic and wondered how so many people could recover at once. And Karen also was left breathless, recognizing the familiar glow and whispering how incredible it was. When the healing was complete, he and Karen mounted the holy beast Genbu. The colossal creature moved and its steps shook the earth. Klaus addressed the crowd and said that this was their transport, and one of the men watched them leave through the gates and suddenly realized. This was the blue hero. He was riding atop the creature. Karen looked at him and whispered his name. As they moved toward the front line, behind them rang a grateful crowd calling his full name in a chorus of hope. Klaus. Klaus Finley, we are counting on you. In the midst of the chaotic battlefield where adventurers fought boar-like creatures, the giant gates opened with a dull rumble, and from the darkness emerged Klaus, riding the colossal holy beast Genbu. He surveys the place with a serious expression. The first platoon is almost destroyed, but he believes that Ursel and the others will be fine. His gaze narrows, he gathers his thoughts and realizes what must become his priority. Somewhere deep in the forest, a battle rages. The second platoon is drowning under the pressure of monsters, and the commander roars, ordering a retreat. At a distance, Klaus watches the knights' tactics closely. They carefully avoid possessed people and direct strikes only at demonic beasts. A large, shadowy creature with piercing eyes commands other monsters to raise the temperature of their blood. In the midst of the battle, Ursel unleashes a destructive force, shouting the name of his move, Scythe of Hellish Blood. Flames erupt around him, engulfing the beasts, while another knight looks on in shock. He warns his men, do not lower your guard, the monsters are fireproof and still alive. Klaus, observing from afar, realizes with horror that Ursel is somehow burning them from the inside. He cannot believe that there is someone so powerful in their land. He freezes, stunned by this revelation, and suddenly a young woman with a firm, determined look steps forward. With a sharp movement, she draws her sword, ready to protect him from a roaring bear-like monster charging at them. In Klaus's mind, a fleeting thought about his sister Karen flashes. He imagines her easily dealing with a swarm of small cat-like creatures, and he feels reassured he can leave everything to her. She will handle it. This thought instantly disappears. The current danger asserts itself again. Klaus stretches out his hands and casts a long-range detection spell. A deep, vibrating tremor passes through the ground. He feels monsters deeper in the forest forming a formation, as if guarding something. Their target reveals itself with a roar that shakes the earth. A colossal bull-headed creature emerges from the forest. Iren recognizes it as the horde boss, the Minotaur King. In shock, he exclaims that this is an SSS-rank monster, too powerful for the Holy Knights alone, and calls for someone to lead the vanguard. In response to the knight's plea, Klaus turns his attention to his mighty ally. He places his hand on the holy beast Jin Bu and asks him to defeat the boss. The huge creature responds to the request and agrees to take on the task. The sacred beast can move, but the Minotaur King lunges forward with incredible speed and swings his massive axe down on Iren. He barely manages to parry it with his sword, and shockwaves scatter through the air from the impact. The creature lunges into attack. Its body ignites with scorching heat as it activates the skill Extreme Heat Blood. The force of the collision hurls Klaus downward, while the unflinching Iren raises his blade and prepares his own counterattack, releasing Holy Cross. As the knight prepares its sacred strike, Klaus suddenly realizes this won't work. With a determined look, he quickly rises and rushes forward, past the astonished places. The sudden movement caught the attention of the sacred beast Jin Bu. The colossal creature looked at the small group Klaus, Iren, and the swordswoman who defiantly stood before the towering King Minotaur, and this scene awakened a memory from the distant past. The memories return him to an ancient clash when the younger Klaus stood against another powerful, stubborn beast. The sacred beast Jin Bu contemplates the nature of its master and understands. Merely cherishing Klaus is not enough. It believed that one who cannot protect their people is unworthy of being a master, and perhaps never said this directly. He recalls how that youth with a firm gaze always placed the safety of others above all else, and threw himself into battle without thinking of the risk to himself. At that moment from the past, Klaus plopped right on his head like a silent declaration of intent, which Jin Bu acknowledged with a thought. So this is Lord Klaus. And then a destructive force thundered, a technique unleashed from the whisper of a name, Extreme Ice Blood. The ice energy struck not the enemy but the horn of Jin Bu himself, and he instantly shattered into pieces. At that moment the sacred beast realized, this was the one who was my master. The memory of the ancient enemy's fall fades and the scene returns to the present. The King Minotaur stands defeated, frozen in ice, while Klaus steps away from the fallen giant, leaving the holy knights frozen in stunned silence. Their shock instantly exploded into cries of disbelief. One of the knights shouted that Klaus had defeated the boss and now only weaker monsters remained, and Klaus, hearing this, turns embarrassed and raises his hands in a defensive gesture. He sweats, trying to downplay the incredible feat, insisting that he only won thanks to their support and could never have managed alone. He rejects all praise, calling them the true heroes, and the knights look on with sincere admiration. He stood amid the stunned silence of the holy knights, who burst into shouts of praise. They shouted that he was incredible and that they had never seen anything like it, and Klaus just listened, a little embarrassed by their subnarration. Their leader Iren approached him, his voice trembling with admiration and gratitude. He confirmed that Klaus had indeed defeated the Minotaur King of SSS rank and kept their losses minimal. Morale soared. Iren said that now they would handle the remaining threats and asked Klaus to explain everything in detail later, and Klaus, overwhelmed, could only quietly. He instantly tried to divert attention, raised his hand and said that there were still monsters nearby, announcing that he was going to use a magic detector to search the surroundings, a convenient excuse to avoid further questions. Surveying the surroundings, he suddenly opened his eyes wide. Something alerted him. His feeling led to a stunning scene. He shouted, "Karen!" pointed to a clearing where Jambu stood. The sacred creature called its master, and Aaron and others turned around. Before them stood a swordswoman with braided hair over two fallen adventurers. Approaching closer, they saw a young man desperately trying to wake his unconscious girlfriend. "Pull yourself together, please," he begged. In the background, Klaus and Jinbu rushed to the place, Klaus desperately calling her name Karen. He knelt beside the fallen girl. Karen, the swordswoman with the braid, explained what had happened. Karen had protected her from a monster attack and was possibly poisoned because of it. While she spoke, a soft glow began to emanate from Klaus's hand. The glow intensified and exploded with a blinding flash of healing energy that completely enveloped Karen. The swordswoman with the braided hair watched, stunned, as Klaus calmly announced a full recovery, and under the wave of this magic Karen's eyes began to open. His attention was drawn to another adventurer, a swordswoman with braids who grimaced in pain. She grabbed her leg and bitterly realized that the healing magic was not working. He watched, his face petrified, as a terrible realization dawned on him. His own powerful healing also failed. This was not a simple injury, but a curse. Somewhere nearby, another adventurer, saved by Klaus. Karen clenched her hands in relief. She sincerely thanked Klaus and said that thanks to him, her father could now rest in peace. The sight of the curse revived a painful memory in Klaus. He recalled his time serving in the mage department when he diagnosed a patient with exactly the same ailment. Back then, he was powerless to find a cure. He remembered the grim verdict. In the final stages, the curse petrifies the victim's body, dooming them to inevitable death. Now he understood with horror that this was the same curse tormenting Karen's companion. Again, in the treatment room of the mages department, Klaus was caring for the unconscious swordswoman when Tamara, the head of the department, entered holding a thick volume and told him that she had been investigating this since another traveler with the same symptoms died. She opened the book to a page with a drawing of a serpent-like creature that resembled a dragon. "Ouroboros," she whispered, asking if it was related to the curse. Tamara explained that fragments from sealed ancient ruins break free and attack people in the surrounding area. Her research confirmed this. Everyone bitten by a fragment of the Ouroboros soon saw a black, curse-like pattern spreading over their body. Klaus returned to his companion, the sacred beast Jinbu, and asked if he knew anything, to which the little turtle apologetically explained that although they were sealed tools, they were unable to recognize the Ouroboros seal, then added words of thanks and assured Klaus that she was fine. He shuddered. The swordswoman's stampede revival turned out to be a harbinger, a sign that fragments of the Ouroboros had mixed within him. He was deceived, and then Tamara finishes the thought aloud with a grim expression. She says that, like the other adventurer, the woman with the sword will most likely begin to slowly turn to stone. Her words stunned Klaus. Tamara says the woman has about 2 years left, and this time frame makes his head spin with thoughts of his sister Karen. He looks at Tamara, searching for even a glimmer of hope, but she bluntly says there is no known cure. Yet when her hand touches the book, she grants a tiny spark of possibility. She explains that in the neighboring country of Saint Folia, records from 200 years ago have been preserved that detail how a saint from that land successfully lifted the Ouroboros curse. While the swordswoman rests, Jinbu adds that the saints of Saint Folia have guarded the Ouroboros seal for generations, so, he says, the current saint may know how to remove Karen's pinching curse. Summoning his willpower, Klaus resolutely said he was setting out for Saint Folia. As he was turning to leave, Tamara shouted to him, "Wait." She explains that the saint of Saint Folia is not someone you can meet just like that. Klaus, undeterred, cheerfully asks her to contact her acquaintances, promises to wait a few days, and smiles gratefully for the help. He says that in the meantime he will check if he can do something with his blue magic. Tamara sharply interrupts him and warns him not to do anything reckless. His determination hardens. When the swordswoman with the scythe gives him a solemn oath, only one goal remains in Klaus's mind: he must break the curse of Ouroboros. Before Klaus stands a gigantic salamander-like creature, all in red flames, and beside him a young woman with long dark hair looks amazed. She understands that this is the one she was looking for, the one who possesses a special golden magic, and she cannot believe that he appeared right before her. In her head raced thoughts from the guild's message about the defeat of King Minotaur during the stampede. She had come to investigate and promised to find the culprit, whom she recognized as the Demon Emperor, and when her thoughts spun even more wildly, Klaus, with a half-hidden face, quietly asked if she was okay, saying that someone like her could save the world. Leaving that meeting, Klaus walks through the corridors of the healing section of the Mages Guild, his face gloomy and determined. He knows he must find a way to lift the curse from Karen. Only footsteps quietly echo as he walks down the quiet corridor. They are interrupted by a voice calling his name. It is Aaron, leader of the Holy Knights. He approaches Klaus with worry on his face, asks if Karen is safe, and explains that Tamara informed him about the situation. He looks into the next room and his face softens with sadness. A woman with a braided sword lies motionless in bed. A small creature resembling a turtle rests by her head. Aaron sadly notices that she is still sleeping. Turning back to Klaus, he advises him not to overexert himself for Karen. Seeing the exhausted Klaus, Aaron extended the wrapped snack, saying that he probably hadn't eaten, and offered to share. Klaus quietly accepted with words of thanks. Sitting together at a small table, Aaron says he wants to talk to Klaus about something else, not about Karen's condition, and looking him straight in the eyes, asks why he was expelled from the Guild of Mages. He stands before Aaron and says that in the hardest times he did not notice the truth, and Aaron presses him, not understanding why such a wonderful person was rejected. He acknowledges the bitter truth of his situation. He was considered worthless because he only knew healing magic, so he was paid half as much as others, and Eren is stunned and cannot believe that Commander Fowl treats a person who saved so many lives and has such talent this way. Their tense conversation is suddenly interrupted by a barely audible groan from the neighboring bed. Both turn in shock, and Klaus exclaims, "Karen-sem." On the bed, the eyes of the woman with the braided sword slowly open. She looks around confusedly and quietly wonders where she is. She suddenly sits up, shuddering at the appearance of two men. "What is this?" she exclaims. Klaus calmly explains that she is in the Mage Guild's healing room and asks how she feels, then her attention is drawn to something on her own arm. She looks down, eyes wide with anxiety. Klaus's voice reaches her, and his grim words sound like a curse. Her gaze freezes on the dark, winding symbol now branded on her forearm. Klaus explains that she probably got it while protecting someone during the fight, then utters a staggering truth. The curse is slowly paralyzing her limbs, and he is powerless to heal her. Eren asks if there are any other treatments, and Klaus replies that Tamara gave him materials about healing performed by Saint Folia, but he knows little about it and cannot offer much hope. His face contorts with anguish because he realizes all his hard work was only to protect Karen. He stands by her bed, consumed by the thought that he was helpless at the most crucial moment. From the bed, Karen quietly responds to his unspoken despair. Her voice makes him apologize. He calls himself a miserable brother. His self-contempt catches her off guard. Her eyes slightly widen. Her surprise instantly melts away. A bright, soothing smile blooms on her face. She energetically sits up and says she is fine and can move without any problems, to the surprise of Klaus and Eren. He freezes, unable to comprehend what he has seen, and only whispers her name, Karen. While he is still trying to understand, Eren steps forward and reminds that Karen saved many of his soldiers. The leader of the Holy Knights promises full cooperation and asks everyone to speak calmly, and Klaus, still trying to process, sincerely thanks them. Karen interrupts, her gaze gentle. She looks directly at her brother and insists that she is fine, saying that it is time for him to go home. To emphasize her thought, she takes his hands in hers. Her soothing smile does not fade as she looks at him. Her determination is unwavering. She decides to seek help from the saint and devote herself to a deeper study of healing methods. Tears ran down her face as she looked at Klaus. He met her gaze with steadfast determination, folded his hands before him, and solemnly vowed he would heal her, and through tears she accepted his promise, insisting that it must be so. He quietly and thoughtfully made a sound of agreement. He sat by her bed and took her hand. The dark, tangled patterns of the curse were a sharp reminder of the ailment they faced side by side. Several days passed. Klaus knelt before Karen and, with a tremor in his voice, explained that since then he had been conducting experiments trying to find a way to heal her. He explained his theory in more detail, suggesting that in those places where her curse magic and his power intertwined, he might try to apply his magic right there. Karen confirmed his observation, noting that although she felt a slight tingling, there was no noticeable effect. He continued, but she suddenly cried out, her face twisted in pain. She apologized and explained that this time the sensation was painfully numbing, a clear sign that the attempt was failing, and sadly added that despite his daily experiments they still saw no positive result. The failure left Klaus completely helpless. He was confused and did not know what to do next, and was tormented by the fact that there was still no word from Amara. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a doorbell. He approached the door and opened it, apologizing for being late. Before him stood a woman with long dark hair, and surprised, he asked who she was. Suddenly, he was overwhelmed when the mysterious woman threw herself into his arms, tightly squeezing him and joyfully shouting his name. It seemed she was wildly happy to have finally met him. He was completely confused by the sudden touch and, stammering, asked what was happening. She, realizing her intrusion, instantly pulled back and apologized, asking him to let her go. The noise attracted people from the house. Karen appeared and asked her brother what was wrong, while another young man with spiky hair sharply demanded to know who is this stranger. Now, surrounded by two people in uniform, the woman bows deeply and officially apologizes to Klaus for her incredibly rude behavior, expressing her sincere. Straightening up, she solemnly introduced herself with an authoritative look. "My name is Seraphina Dale. I am the second saint of Cynifolia." Klaus's eyes widened in shock. He recalls how Tamara spoke about the saint and cannot understand why such an important figure came all the way to him. Before he can utter a word, Karen steps forward and asks Seraphina if she knows about Ouroboros. Seraphina replies that she does. That is exactly why she is here, and politely asks if they would listen to her story. Agreeing to hear her out, the group sits at the table, and one of Serafina's attendants hands Klaus an official letter, requesting that he review it first. He glanced down at the document, and suddenly a vision flashed in his mind. A woman in a flawless white dress and veil, hands folded before her. She introduced herself as Maria Folia, the great saint of Cynifolia. The vision of the great saint addressed him directly. Her voice sounded resolute. She begged him, as the bearer of golden magic, to merge with the sacred beast, seal the Ouroboros, and protect the world she called the current lord of demons. The weight of her words exploded in the scabbard with a scythe's shock and rage on the face, and she firmly demanded to know why Klaus, the one who sealed the legendary lord of demons, must now become the next. To this outburst of emotion, Serafina calmly began to explain the essence, pointing to a world map. The world is in chaos, and the 4 nations of Centifolia are at its very heart. She continued, delving into the history of their duty, and revealed that Cynifolia's role is to pacify the Ouroboros. Once it was sealed by the country of Arland, but after several hundred years the seal was finally broken. The seal was torn off, the sacred creature lost. She explained their desperate state. Every time the Ouroboros broke free, they had to find a person with the same golden magic as the first sealer to seal it again. Law slowly digested this stunning news and asked if the saint's goal was to guard the seal of Ouroboros. The swordswoman with the braided braid instantly jumped up and asked if that was exactly why they had traveled all this way. Serafina confirmed that he understood everything and reported that her country uses crystals that can measure the power of the demon lord worldwide, and that they are currently using them to search for him. She extends to Klaus a shining pendant and asks him to pour some of his magic into it. He froze in surprise, recalling the magic ability test 5 years ago. He remembers how others' magic glowed red or black, but his alone was illuminated golden. Serafina says that this is exactly what they were looking for and explains that the pendant given to him 2 weeks ago was how they finally found him. The realization struck him with a stunning force. He mentally asked himself, could it really mean that he inherited the power of the Lord of Demons? Serafina quickly refutes his assumption is not the demon lord, instead begging him, Klaus, to help them seal Ouroboros again. Another urgent thought flashed in his head. He insists that the curse must be lifted from his companion and knows they are already aware of this. Serafina acknowledges it but firmly insists on the urgency of their main mission and warns that if they delay, monsters will fill the world. She continues to explain that the only way to lift the curse is to defeat Ouroboros. The problem, she admits, is that from the very beginning this creature was only sealed, never truly destroyed. Laos pondered, remembering that even Saint Tamara could not lift the curse. Just then Serafina intervened and said that there is actually another way to lift it. She explains it is necessary to obtain the scale of the holy dragon Kirin, a creature that is the direct opposite of our Ouroboros. She continued explaining and honestly admitted, finding Kirin is almost impossible and she doesn't know how to do it. Klaus and the young Spades listened stunned, and she added that Kirin's existence is shrouded in mystery and, unlike the holy beasts, they say he is a creature whose sole purpose is to directly seal the Ouroboros. Her story suddenly became personal. She confessed that her father was struck by a curse and was once under Klaus's care. Then her mother set out to find Kirin to save him but never returned, and Klaus's eyes widened in shock. The memory of the incurable patient suddenly came together. It was her father. Her gloomy expression instantly vanished, replaced by a bright, determined smile. She said that now everything was different. She had become a saint, and Klaus was the Lord of Demons, and she was sure that together they would find a cure. The woman with the sword, though hesitant, quietly nodded in agreement. Serafina suggested that they all discuss Kirin's matter with the great saint, begging her to agree. She did not back down, resolutely proposing to immediately arrange a meeting with the great saint and return together to Centifolia, and also asked for permission to speak with Kirin and others from the guild. The swordswoman gladly agreed. Law, stunned by the sudden flurry of plans, asked aloud where they should even start, and Serafina just smiled and reassured him, "Don't worry, you are our benefactor." Watching her walk away down the corridor, he felt as if his mind had finally cleared for the first time in a long while. A glimmer of hope appeared, and the path forward finally became visible. He turned back to the swordswoman, his face hardening with determination, placed his hand on her shoulder, and said he was heading to Centifolia to ask the great saint for help. He informs his sister of his decision. She, with gentle determination in her eyes, clenches her fists and quietly agrees. Meanwhile, in Woodville Castle, Faltino from the Guild of Mages stands before the king. King Kiefer sincerely thanks him for his efforts and for the large supply of endurance potions he recently delivered. Modestly brushing off the praise, he suddenly adopts a sly expression and, changing the subject, asks King Kiefer if he has heard the news about the adventurer who single-handedly defeated the Minotaur king. The king's gaze sharpens. He begins to pressure Fowl, demanding the name of the traveler, and Fowl, noticeably nervous, stammers that he does not know anyone like that. He leans back on the throne, his voice authoritative. He informs Fowl that he has a very important task for him, which he hopes he will carry out, and Fowl accepts the order without hesitation. The monarch finally utters the name he was seeking, Klaus Finley, and orders Fowl to personally recruit this young man into the Guild of Mages. His eyes widened in disbelief, shock swept across his face as he tried to comprehend the king's order. At that very moment, Klaus stands in the shop, gathering supplies for the journey, and suddenly freezes. A thought strikes him with bitter irony. After exile, now he is being called back. In the healing room under the starry sky, Tamara reads a letter. Surprise plays on her face. She quietly whispers, not believing that she was destined to meet the third saint and that all this is connected with the vow of the great saint Sinifolia. While Tamara thoughtfully examined the letter, Klaus appeared. He admitted that he too was surprised when he was summoned, and Tamara, turning to him with the envelope sealed with wax, says that this is exactly the letter she was told about. His expression becomes serious as he processes what he has read. One phrase echoes in his mind: the faith that he can help the person she is today. Thank you for the information, but Tamara looks at him knowingly and says that his desire to help is so great that his heart seems transparent, and his intentions are pure and visible to all. Seeing his sincere determination, Tamara decides to give him a farewell gift for the journey and says she wants to tell him a story. Divine dives into a painful memory. She recalls a time when a magical beast overcame her, and it was so traumatic that she could not even fight. Locked in the healing room, she felt as if she had betrayed her duty as a sorceress, powerless amid that chaos. Henry is sharpening. The bandaged man cries out for help. Much younger Klaus steps forward and tells the seated patient that he will handle everything. Then the boy rushed and snatched the unstable, glowing magical artifact from someone else's hands, and Tamara, shocked and frightened, called out his name. Always hold on. The dangerous light fades. Young Klaus returned with a bright smile and announced that the danger had passed. Tamara scolds him for recklessness. The memory fades, and in her present thoughts emerges the conclusion. At that moment, she decided that protecting Klaus's good heart was more important than her own pride. Klaus, slightly flushed in the cheeks, thought admiringly to himself that Tamara was truly an incredible user of healing magic. This thought hardened into a vow under the starry sky. He promised to master the healing skills Tamara taught him, to heal Karen, and to ensure that the vile monsters would never harm anyone again. The next day, when their little dragon settled on his shoulder, Klaus told Karen that the guild was closed for the day. They were preparing to depart. Ursel approached and asked if Karen would go with them. Then he addressed Klaus directly and revealed a stunning truth. His lineage, the Albertis, was a clan of guardians sworn to protect the sacred beast Jinbu, and a stunned Klaus only asked if he meant the demon lord. Ursel explained that his task was only to watch over the sacred beast and honestly admitted that if the demon lord appeared, he might not be able to handle it. Then he asked Klaus if he knew where the demon lord was, and Klaus quietly replied that he did. The creature on Klaus's shoulder intervened. The sacred beast Jinbu awakens simultaneously with the demon lord, and Ursel confirmed this, explaining that near the sacred land where the beast slumbers lives a clan of guardians. He finally revealed his true purpose. Although his duty was to guard the seal, the sudden appearance of the demon lord could force him to swear allegiance to the holy Beside, who proclaimed a divine mission to cleanse the world, so he solemnly asked Klaus to allow him to join their journey as Jinbu's guardian. The revelation struck Klaus with incredible force. He suddenly shuddered and realized that Ursel's clan had been preparing for this for generations, and that he himself, unknowingly, had been searching for the Chilan horn with the help of these devoted people. Ursel looked at him intently and added that his duty as a guardian was an unshakable obligation from which he would not retreat. He considers Ursel's proposal and, realizing he can no longer manage alone, agrees with a serious expression, saying he understands and looks forward to their partnership. Having made the decision, he walks through the city alongside his sister Karen. A gloomy silence hangs between them as they move forward. They met Jerry, and Klaus entrusted his sister to her care. Jerry smiled brightly and confidently, assuring him she would handle everything. Then Klaus turned to Karen and told her it was time for him to go. She looks up at him, calls him brother, and hesitantly asks if she could really join him later when she recovers. Jerry gently intervened, asking Karen to rest a little, then added with a kind smile that she would be glad if Karen stayed with her for a while. He silently agrees with Jerry's advice. He knows it is the best decision. He realizes the path ahead is too dangerous for her to go alone in such a state. Determination flashed across his sister's face. She looked him in the eyes and promised, "As soon as I recover, we will set off on an adventure together." Her words suddenly ignited joy in him. He enthusiastically agrees and paints a vivid picture of their future, traveling to unknown lands, attending festivals, street food, and victories over monsters. When she asks if he is serious, he smiles broadly and says that, of course, they will be just like that together as adventurers. When he was about to set off, the swordswoman with braids who had joined his squad beamed a bright smile in which the stars themselves shone. She cheerfully confirmed her decision, telling him that if he was going on adventures, she would gladly go with him. When he and Ursel set out on the road, Klaus waved goodbye and promised that he would definitely return. The journey began under a wide sky dusted with clouds. Riding on their large lizard-like saddle, Ursel remarked with a relaxed smile that riding Genbu was unexpectedly comfortable. Taking the opportunity, Klaus asked his companion to tell more about himself. Ursel began the story and explained that he had already been to Cynifolia. He lived there until he was 15, then admitted that he never imagined that one day he would go on such a journey. He continued, his gaze distant. It was clear that since childhood he had often been told about his life mission. Hearing this, Klaus's face became serious. He frankly confessed a burning desire to become stronger and explained that it was not only because of his feelings about helping his sister Karen. He needed strength to break the seal of Ouroboros, especially since the saints helped him, though they barely knew him. Ursel weighed the words for a moment and said that strength is an unknown thing. A memory of their departure surfaced, and seeing the swordswoman in armor, he invited her to sit on their steed and go with them. While they were riding, Ursel asked if their goal was the capital of Cynifolia. Klaus confirmed but said the road was blocked. Due to recent panic, monsters appeared from the herd, and at that moment a huge two-headed wolf-like beast lunged at them, causing the swordswoman with braids to shout in alarm. Instantly, the swordswoman with the braided hair dashed forward with her blade. The creature defended itself as sharp black spikes grew from its skin, a technique known as extreme icy blood, and Klaus and Ursel froze in shock. The monster is defeated and lies motionless in the middle of the street. The road is still clear. Klaus anxiously turns to Ursula and asks if they can stop by Tamara's on the outskirts of the city, insisting that she must immediately teach him something extremely important. He smiles, gestures forward, and tells Klaus to lead. Meanwhile, in a quiet office of a large building, Klaus's sister, Karen, sits at a desk, resting her chin on her hand and, lost in thought, anxiously whispers her brother's name. Her thoughts are suddenly interrupted when the door bursts open with a bang. Commander Fowl rushes into the room, his face twisted with rage, shouting and demanding to know if Klaus Finley is here. He slams his fist on the reception desk, demanding Karen's name and the reason for her visit. He brushes her off as a cheeky receptionist and orders Klaus Stammer to be brought immediately. She stands up, her face hardening with defiance, grabs the bird's hand with amazing strength, and tells him she has nothing to say to a man without manners and common sense, and orders him to believe that she acts without hesitation. Her hand seizes Commander Fowl's, and a wave of icy power instantly wraps his fist in jagged ice. Her hand glows with an icy aura, and she shows a wide, eerie smile. Fowl screams and recoils from the piercing cold. Angry, he demands to know what she is doing to his dear secretary, but Karen simply asks what business he has with her. Watching the exchange, Jerry looked on, a drop of sweat shining on her forehead. She did not hear the spell and realized that both of them were incredibly strong. He ignores the cold and bluntly says he is looking for Klaus Finley, who must be involved in this very offense. Before he could continue, Karen slammed her free hand on the counter with a loud bang and exclaimed that Klaus was probably in the capital of Maltino, and she swore she would catch that clumsy fool herself. She decisively declared that silence is cowardly. With a sly smile, Karen turned to the nervous Jerry and asked if he had told her brother about her, adding that she needed to have a serious talk with Klaus, and her aura became so threatening that Jerry noticeably froze. She returns to the reception desk, her face slightly softened. Jerry says that the other adventurers probably won't come back, but asks her to stay on duty a little longer. As soon as Jerry agrees, Karen approaches the window and looks outside. She thinks that her brother has surely already arrived in the country, and suddenly a memory emerges. She was 5 when she found out that she and Klaus are not blood relatives. Her thoughts return to a childhood conversation. She remembered explaining to little Klaus that since they are not blood brother and sister, they can always be together because, she thought, even without shared blood, if they love each other, they can stay close forever, and it was this naive thought that made her question the idea of marriage. The memory surfaced in the present. She felt the childlike happiness of learning and the belief that she could become his bride, but now she knows that to him she is only a younger sister, and yet a new hope smoldered in her heart. If her wish comes true and they both become adventurers, maybe everything will be different. This hope fueled a quiet, determined desire that she held close to her heart for him to finally look at her and only her. She kept this secret desire within herself while Klaus looked into the distance, his face unreadable deep in his heart. Feelings remained unspoken. Riding on Jinbu, Klaus and Ursel arrived at a secluded wooden cabin, hidden deep in the forest where the sun breaks through the leaves in patches. Jumping down, Klaus looked at the modest dwelling, and a spark of understanding flashed in his eyes. For a moment he realized why they had come to such a remote place. Approaching the cabin, Ursel asks if Klaus knows whose it is, and Klaus with a serious expression says it must belong to Fowl, the former commander of the magic department, and the answer clearly impresses Ursel. She refutes the boy's assumption. They are here to see Morse Cambridge, a man known as a genius in manipulating magic. His name hangs in the air, wrapped in an aura of stunning power and brilliance of mind. House is stunned by the revelation. Thoughts race in his head. He cannot keep up with processing the new information, and Ursel continues and adds that Morris is a member of the respected Albert family. The introduction is over. He pushes open the creaky wooden door and gestures for Klaus to enter the workshop. What meets them is an organized chaos. A man with long light hair sits with his back to them, fully immersed in work among piles of books, papers, and strange mechanical parts. The hands he loved so much hovered over the complex device, a panel with a large central dial and a bunch of buttons. He muttered to himself as if making the final, delicate adjustment. Ursel briefly turns to Klaus and, sighing irritably, looks at him. He says that the launch of the new hyperspatial communication device caused a huge influx of requests, and at this pace they will never keep up. He waves his hand at the whole mess and asks Klaus to find a place to sit. In the workshop, Klaus politely introduced himself to the seated figure of Morse Cambridge. The solitary genius barely turned his head, as if acknowledging the introduction and confirming that it was indeed Klaus before him. While the conversation was barely beginning, another voice interrupted. An old man with a piercing gaze said he had heard from Tamara about their request to meet the saint, and that he was asked to personally assess Klaus. Wasting no time, a smile spread across his face. He immediately challenged Klaus to a competition right here and now. The sudden proposal stunned Klaus. They went out to the clearing behind the workshop, and the old man explained his challenge. He firmly believed that a person's true character and strength are revealed only in face-to-face confrontation. After finishing his explanation, the old man lifted off the ground and rose into the air, enveloped in a pillar of light. He called Klaus to begin, and Klaus, looking up in disbelief, realized this power was incredible and far exceeded anything he had seen in any adventure he had participated in. This deafening display of power instantly threw Ursel off balance. He exploded with anger, shouted that this was not at all what they had agreed on, and reminded the old man that Klaus was supposed to be tested, not him. Calmly loading, the old man just laughed, agreed with the argument, and announced that Ursel, guildmaster of Woodville and leader of the Black-Winged Falcon, would fight for him in the duel. Then he told Klaus to prepare, and the young man agreed. In response, Klaus focused his energy. A complex magical sign flared in his palm. He summoned the skills Regine, Limit Break, and Divine Secret Awakening, and a formidable sword with a dark blade materialized in his hand. Opposite him, Ursel stood ready, weapon in hand, and a stern expression on his face. He raised his hand, asking Ursel to wait, but the guildmaster announced he would strike first to catch the flow of the fight, and with amazing speed Ursel closed the distance, his dark blade already in motion. Powerful swing tore Klaus's cloak, and he instantly realized he could not allow Ursel to touch him. He feels his strength being drawn out. He recognizes it as a black magical curse that sucks energy. Gritting his teeth through this exhaustion, he casts the High Heels spell, and it dawns on him. This must be the power of the demonic sword Ursel Shiva. He jumps back, creating distance. He knows that if Ursel touches him directly, he won't be able to cast magic. Ursel looks at him with a confident smile and asks if he's done yet, adding that Klaus hasn't even counterattacked. The guildmaster doesn't stop mocking, asking if Klaus will just let him get behind his back. Klaus admits that fighting a thinking opponent is hard and decides he has no choice to accept the challenge, and at that moment Ursel swiftly does a backflip. In response, a complex magical glyph appears before him. He succeeded. The completed spell shot forward and hit Ursel right in the back. The guildmaster exclaimed in surprise, and the old man watched with lively interest. For Klaus, the world darkened and he lost consciousness. The spell dissipates from Ursul's back, a forced release of magic. He sat down, confused, demanding to know what Klaus did and insisting that he managed to dodge the attack, but Klaus lay unconscious on the ground and could not answer. He recovered after the duel and, explaining to Ursul and Moore's Cambridge the essence of his unique magic, showed a glowing magical circle. Klaus explained that it must be drawn in advance because activation takes time, but it uses very little magical energy, declaring the technique successful. Ursul nodded in understanding, and the depressed Moors, having lost a bet, asked what he should do, to which Klaus reassured him and admitted that he knows no other magic besides this. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an authoritative old man who approached from the neighboring building. He smiled warmly and raised a small, intricate device before them to show. He explained that this thing is a magical tool, a communication machine that expands its radius by having a fixed amount of magic poured into all its circles. The old man said that if Klaus learns to pour his own magic into it, he will definitely become stronger. When he extended the device, Ursul intervened and told Klaus to wait, then turned to Morris and ordered him to do his job. Klaus agreed, but Ursul's interference clearly confused him. He did not take his eyes off Morris and, clearly irritated, questioned him why he agreed to such an overwhelming amount of work, while Klaus looked puzzled as the old man opened a large box filled with dozens of the same communication devices. The old man explained that the recent furious onslaught of monsters created a bottleneck, and because of this, these magical devices became extremely necessary for many people. He continued, without these communication devices, people will find themselves in trouble. Suddenly, a diagram materialized, showing how monsters block the paths between settlements and cut off all contacts. When his explanations ended, the old man's gaze softened. He looked directly at Klaus and said that he sees traces of his efforts, the path that his magic has paved, that these efforts are not for himself but for another person, and that is why he must continue to train. Klaus raised his eyes, and for a moment they lit up with surprise and sudden understanding. He eagerly takes on the task, and beside him Ursul sighs heavily. Fatigue is evident in every movement. Ursul immediately objected and even offered to help, but the old craftsman sharply silenced him and explained that Ursul's way of infusing magic is too rough and would produce a completely different result. Klaus, however, he smiles to himself, thinking that he wanted to work in the magical core where Morris was. The old master again turns his attention to him and explains, although his control and speed are good, the most important thing is to make the flow of magic even, whether Klaus understood how exactly he just used his magic. He adds that his eyes are so sharp that he can see the very flow of magic. Raising one of the communicators, he asks Klaus to try to direct his power into it to check. When Klaus pours magic into the device, it sparkles and crackles with energy. The old man explains how it works. A certain amount of magic must be led in a thin stream and for a long time to extend the communication range. One properly enchanted device works for 10 kilometers, and the test, he says, is to successfully enchant 10 such devices so that in total it reaches 100 kilometers and their bypass. After setting the parameters, he officially asks Klaus to complete a large batch of devices, and Klaus, holding the communicator, eagerly accepts the challenge and promises to do his best. At first he was overwhelmed with excitement, but it quickly gives way to a more serious assessment. He realizes that with his current ability he will only be able to enchant 5 devices, and he feels the process as a long, steady exhalation of magic. He gathers his will into a fist and resolutely declares that he will see the matter through to the end. Nearby, the old craftsman advises Ursul not to waste magic, and Ursul, it seems, thoughtfully counts in his head the 7 devices he has already managed to make. His determination was fueled by memories of Karen. She held one of the devices and explained that with its help they would be able to contact important people. Then she promised him full support as her master, a promise he gladly accepted. Recalling that memory, he focuses his energy. Magic flares around the device in his hands, and it begins to glow brightly, while Ursul stands a few steps away watching. In the workshop, Ursul lifts the successfully enchanted device, a victorious smile shining on his face. Klaus looks from behind the table cluttered with parts, his eyes wide with amazement. He proudly tells the master that everything is ready, and almost immediately Klaus adds that he has also finished his task. The old man examines their work and smiles contentedly. They lit not just 10, but all 15 devices, which is a great help. He says that both have passed and proposes the next task. Try to channel magic through a magical sword. In response, Ursul summons a formidable weapon. A large dark blade with a serrated edge appears in his hand, sparkling with a powerful aura, and he shouts its name, the magical sword Shiva. An incredible power emanates from the blade. Klaus freezes, stunned, and comes to a simple, terrible conclusion. Ursel's magic is on a completely different level, and under such conditions, he definitely cannot win. He is still stunned by the recent burst of power when the old master orders him to create a magical formation with both hands. Klaus, confused, asks for clarification of the order, but the master simply pushes him forward, and a faint healing light flickers nearby. Following the instructions, he stretches out his hands and, not believing his eyes, sees two glowing magical circles suddenly appear before him. With surprise, he realizes that he can now simultaneously deploy two formations, which he had not been able to do before. Ursel watches, a shadow of irritation crossing his face, muttering that he wants a rematch. Ignoring him, an excited Klaus asks the master if he can continue training in Cynifolia, even if Morris will not be there. The old master smiled warmly and agreed, adding, "Of course, it is better for Klaus to show up." His face lit up with a broad, relieved smile, and he and Ursel exchanged a look of mutual understanding. Training was over, and a grateful voice echoed across the spaces, thanking the master for his mentorship. Meanwhile, in the royal castle of Centifolia, Seraphina Dale begs in despair. She says that to heal her sister, she needs help finding Kylan, and insists if Klaus restores the sacred beast, it will prevent the revival of Ouroboros. She directs her words to a young girl who listens with a worried expression, and the girl cannot believe it. Could it be that Seraphina, who was recently a commoner, has the power to save the world? Riding on a huge saurian steed through the dense forest, Klaus sincerely thanked Ursel for negotiating with the great saint and obtaining a communication device from Oris. During the journey, Ursel, as if casually, admits that his family is already allied with the house of the Duke of Cynifolia, and this is what made their negotiations smooth. Klaus Steyer, stunned by the news, asks why Ursel never mentioned his. Admiration turned to surprise when Klaus asked why Ursel, the guild master, was so deeply involved in the affairs of the Duke's family. Ursel calmly replied that the great saint is a prudent person and it is always better to be well prepared. Klaus seized this determination and announced his intention. In exchange for the return of the 4 sacred beasts, he would ask for help finding them a guardian. Hearing this resolute statement, Ursel grew serious, feeling the full weight of Klaus's decision. Finally, they arrived in the capital Martino. Klaus looked admiringly at the beautiful, sunlit architecture and felt some mysticism in the city, and Ursel confirmed that this was the very country ruled by the same one. He walks the lively streets, feels the friendly, warm atmosphere, and thinks that this is the kind of city Karen would simply love, so he promises to bring her here one day. Castle turned his gaze to the majestic building in the distance, Cynifolia Castle, and resolutely told Klaus that it was time for their meeting with the great saint. In the castle corridor, their path is crossed by a frightened woman running away, and immediately behind her appears Seraphina Dale, calling Selina by the hand. She freezes for a moment, eyes widening as she recognizes the guests, Klaus himself. She exclaims in shock, and Klaus is equally stunned, not understanding why she is here and why she is talking to him about the great saint. They were led with Ursel to the great hall, where a woman named Seraphina apologized for the wait, addressed the great Saint Mariana, who silently stood on a distant dais, and then turned to Klaus and said that she was meeting the demon lord for the first time. She looked impressed by her quiet dignity and inwardly called her the great Saint Mariana. He bowed his head low. She thanked him for the opportunity to speak and gently asked him to raise his head. She continued, explaining that the demon lord is a rare creature that appears only once every few hundred years. He was stunned when she said that it is they who swear allegiance to the demon lord, and she asked him not to worry and to speak frankly. He faltered, whispered thank you, still unable to comprehend her words. Seraphina then nudged him to move on to the main topic of his visit. Her gaze slid to the creature sitting on her shoulder. She recognized Ouroboros as the lord of demons and said that his seal could be broken by the 4 sacred beasts. He was confused by this revelation. The thought that the demon lord would bow before a great saint seemed incredible, but he realized this might be his only way forward, and he wondered if Selina had told her about it. From afar came a new voice, the little turtle Jinbu. He said that the 4 sacred beasts are awakening and the breaking of the seal is only a matter of time, then voiced their wish. That the demon lord returned to the sacred beasts in his true form. The scene shifts to a solemn hall where Klaus stands before Seraphina and formally accepts her terms, but adds that he has one request. The meeting took place due to a desperate plea. A young servant had earlier informed Selina that her younger sister suffers from the curse of Ouroboros. Under the pressure of urgency, he turns to Seraphina with a clear request. Before restoring the other sacred beasts, he needs to find Kirin, and he is ready to provide all known information: his signs, place of residence, and the exact time and date of the last sighting. He slightly bowed his head and, almost whispering, apologized to the demon emperor for the trouble this would cause. Before he can continue, Serafina interrupts him, her voice resolute. She states that he cannot search for Kirin until the sacred beasts regain consciousness. Klaus's eyes widen in shock. Her words stunned him. He stammers, saying that he has almost no time left and that his sister's life is in danger. She coldly and definitively states her position. She cannot help him search for Kirin, and these words leave Klaus speechless. She explains that fulfilling his duty to that other beast is the main condition. This burden weighs him down, his mind is spinning, and he asks for a moment to think. Conversation unfolds near a large building with a spire under a partly cloudy sky. Nearby, a maid with a braid anxiously addresses Serafina, insisting that Klaus bears a heavy burden of responsibility and truly cherishes sister Selena. She slightly turns her head, her face unwavering, and firmly states her duty to protect the lives of hundreds of millions of people. He smiles understandingly, as if accepting that he is different from her. He recalls that not long ago he was a simple boy and remembers the kind healer who once helped him and stopped the brand that he. She listens, but then asks doubtfully, why do people give their country to a saint if the blood of a holy woman itself guarantees nothing? She says that it is because she was raised with understanding and iron determination to protect the country, and from birth she was given special education to fulfill this very duty. The journey to restore the sacred beast to consciousness will be filled with many difficulties. He walks away thinking about this incredible burden, when suddenly told to save the world without preparation or resolve. It is hard not to give up halfway. He returns, but Serafina's voice stops him. She rejects what she said earlier and suddenly, with passionate determination, declares, if it is for his sake, she will definitely save the world. The scene shifts to the past. Serafina sits before the large Saint Maria Folia wrapped in a veil and confesses that there was one thing about Qilin she never dared to tell her. She continues, revealing the terrible truth she had hidden. To obtain the Chilean's key, the saint must become a human sacrifice, and in her imagination flashed a picture: a young girl stands before a radiant, ethereal figure of a beast. The secret is revealed. Qilin is merely a sealed form of Ouroboros, and when the saint sacrifices herself, Qilin drops the key, the very instrument capable of lifting Ouroboros' curse. Serafina makes a shocking personal confession to the great saint. The current Qilin, she says, is her older sister and simultaneously her mother, and in her memory emerges the image of a woman who strangely resembles her and stands before that creature. The great saint could not believe it. She questioned the 2-century-old legend that the saint must become a sacrifice to obtain the key, and asked if this terrible story was true, leaving Serafina stunned and speechless. Returning to the present, Serafina reveals another bitter truth to Klaus. In his grief, the father himself tried to lift the curse to save his wife, thereby becoming a Qilin, and she says with regret that she did not manage to stop him. Her sorrow hardens into iron determination. She clenches her hands. She reaffirms her vow once more, looking forward with unwavering resolve. She will do it for Klaus. She stood before the great saint, saying she understood Klaus's feelings, but then asked one sharp question. What if Klaus gets the Chilean's key and simply abandons his journey? Before her eyes flashed a picture of her younger self, surrounded by grotesque, grasping hands. Without Klaus, she and the whole country would be lost, and demons would overrun the world. The great saint, addressing her as Selena, asked if despite these fears she still intended to trust Klaus. Her gaze did not waver. Her determination was clear. While the city bustled, Ursel tried to lift Klaus's spirits and suggested a walk, but Klaus, with a worried expression, turned to the guild master and asked what he should do. His calm shattered. He exploded with frustration and shouted that he could never restore all the holy creatures to their true forms. Ursel calmly noted that if they helped Karen, they would not be able to restore the sacred beasts, and added that the great saint could not be trusted. Klaus clenched his fist. Torn inside, he dreamed of making Karen happy, but she was the one suffering. He continued thinking, looking at the market, and the one who possessed that unique power was his dear sister, but such a person could hardly be called a protector of the people. To emphasize the point, Ursel directly addressed the young hero. He looked into his eyes and asked a sharp, simple question: does Klaus truly have the will to protect the world? He is silent, lost in a memory of Karen. She smiles and asks if he can still fight even when she is gone, reminding him that if he abandons his duty, the world will suffer a terrible fate. This realization must live within him. Thoughts race through his head, sweat drips from his forehead. he feels his duty and determination but suddenly realizes he hasn't even thought through what exactly he was supposed to say to Serafina about the spirit's will. Ursul's voice cut through his inner chaos and calmly said, "It should be so." He calmly says that he is not angry at Klaus for his indecision, but is simply talking to him now to understand what he is thinking and to assess the situation. Then he says that he believes Klaus will save the world, but directly asks if he has enough determination for this. The guild master's gazes hardened, and one of them sharply told Klaus that it cannot be that Karen is the only person who matters to him, reminding him of the evidence of his heroism and the countless people he has already saved. While he speaks, images of those clowns flash in the young man's mind. Ursul insists, if Klaus does not find determination within himself, he will achieve nothing for the sake of all these people. He must do it. The words hit deeply. Klaus's eyes widened, tears not yet shed glistened in them as the weight of Ursul's truth descended upon him. He stood with his back to Ursul, listening tensely. The guild master gave him one last piece of advice. From now on he must think independently, and Ursul assured that as soon as he decides on a topic, he will arrange a meeting with the great saint on his behalf. The conversation ended and Klaus found himself before Serafina Dale, the second saint, who looked at him intently and told him to remember his own weakness. He shuddered but remained determined and firmly answered yes. That morning, when he finally decided what he would do, Klaus left the tavern together with Karen. Outside, Ural stood with crossed arms and asked if they had already decided, to which Klaus firmly nodded, his face full of determination. After he made the decision, he and Ursul saw Seraphine and the great Saint Maria Folia off through the city streets. When they approached the magnificent cathedral, Seraphine turned to them and thanked them again for taking the time for her. In the sacred halls of the cathedral, the great saint addressed Seraphine directly and announced that she had received a response from Ursul, but her tone hinted that everything turned out to be more complicated, and Seraphine listened with a worried expression. While the saints deliberated, Klaus gathered himself, his gaze directed forward. Quietly but decisively, he ordered to move out, ready for what was about to happen. Determination met an unexpected turn. The great saint sincerely apologized, and her words made Seraphine's eyes widen in shock while Ursul looked on, unable to believe what he saw. She could not understand that apology and asked the great saint about it. Serafina recalled that she herself had uttered a harsh word and wondered aloud why it was Maria Folia who was apologizing. Was it somehow connected to Klaus? The reason for the apology became clear when Klaus knelt before the great saint and, pleading, explained, "Whoever possesses great power also bears enormous responsibility, for he inherited the might of the Lord of Demons, and if he does not awaken the holy beast, the whole world will perish." He took this burden upon himself, and Seraphine was stunned. He continued his solemn vow, his gaze remained unwavering. The image of Karen, bound in chains, flashed in his thoughts as he declared that he would save the great saint at any cost, and even if it meant that fate would chain him as well. Seraphine watched, her face showing confusion and anxiety. He walked alongside his sister, and his thoughts finally clarified the goal. He needed neither wealth nor fame. The only thing that truly mattered was not to become the one who would place the fate of the world on his sister's shoulders. For him, this was a simple, undeniable truth. Then he addressed the great saint directly, his voice firm and confident. He admitted that he should have openly stated from the beginning his intention to awaken the holy beast. The great Saint Maria Folia listened without expression on her face. He continued, saying that his sister had always been above all to him and always would be. She quietly confirmed his words, but a hint of doubt sounded in her voice. His thoughts returned again to the promise made under the starry sky. He told the younger Karen about his dream to become a traveler, to join Ursul's guild, to travel the world and taste dishes in countless places. But even then, he knew such dreams would come true only if he was truly happy. Turning to the present, he frankly spoke about his feelings. He explained that Karen was his first motivation, but later he met many others who cared about him, people he now very much wants to protect. His gaze fell on the great saints, their faces shining with hope. He solemnly asked her for help, asked if she would agree to cooperate with him to save the world together. Yes. Smiling and crossing his arms with new confidence, he promised to do everything possible and added that he would be grateful for any information she could provide about Karen. Sincere pleading and unwavering determination clearly moved the great saint. Her eyes shone with emotion. She looked at him and in his eyes saw not just pleading, but a whole universe of determination sparkling with the weight of all the lives he wanted to protect. His mind was filled with the faces and voices of those he had sworn to save. Selena, who desperately begged to save their lives, the old craftsman who encouraged him not to stop making communication devices to speak with loved ones again, and the young man who vowed to become stronger. Their shared hope pressed on him. The responsibility he felt compelled him to fight for their happiness. Seeing the depth of his convictions, a single tear slowly rolled down Maria Foley's cheek. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke, her voice full of admiration. She acknowledged his intention. He truly wanted to save them all. Having made her decision, she gestured for them to follow her deeper into the chamber, addressed Klaus, and as if steeled her soul. As they moved further, she began to explain how she came to her decision. She admitted that, based only on the information he provided, it would be reckless to demand that he be taken hostage. She had to make a difficult decision. He paused for a moment and admitted that using people as bargaining chips was the act of an immature demon lord, and now he understood that. She quietly laughed, smiled gently, and under Selena's gaze calmed him by saying that he truly was a wonderful demon lord. When a new alliance is born, Ursel confidently winks and hands Klaus a communication device, explaining that he heard from Morris about their efforts to help manufacture such devices for the inhabitants. Meanwhile, Maria Folia contemplates the consequences of their agreement, and a determined smile appears on her face. She understands that this alliance will simultaneously make everyone stronger. She reaches out her hand to Klaus, her face bright and resolute, calls him to join, and says that together they will save the world. He takes her hand without hesitation, solidifying their pact. Nearby, Ursel and Selena watch. The two approval of the newly formed alliance is evident on their faces. Their path leads straight to a huge structure, a place connected with the very same black magic they seek to understand. Maria Folia leads the group to majestic, finely carved doors, announces that this is the way forward, then turns and addresses one of those present. She places her hand on the surface of the doors and, looking at the stunned Klaus, says that only the power of the Lord of Demons can open them. The request is clear: she needs his magic. He stands before the majestic doors, which open with a low, dull groan, revealing the way forward. Maria Folia waits a little behind him, a silent observer. His eyes widen in amazement as he enters the grand throne hall, shrouded in ethereal light. At the far end stands a luxurious throne, empty but still formidable, and Maria Folia's voice echoes from behind, explaining that this is the room where demon lords renounce the throne one by one. A sudden feeling of familiarity pierces him, as if he has been here before. His gaze falls on the bright magical circle on the floor, the pattern identical to his own, and he asks aloud why it is here. The sight of the circle unleashes a flood of fragmented images in his mind. A smiling woman, monsters, joyful children, and fleeting flashes of his own past, all blending into a chaotic storm of thoughts. He pushed back, clutching his head as a mental attack overwhelmed him. He tells himself he knows nothing of it, but despite this, a wave of familiarity floods his consciousness. With growing horror, he realizes these memories are not his. While he struggles with foreign thoughts, Maria Folia calmly asks if memories of the first Lord of Demons have returned to him. The question struck Klaus so strongly that he stands stunned and does not believe the assumption that he is the reincarnation of the Lord of Demons. He knows in his head there is real chaos, so much information that everything gets confused. Seeing his confusion, she suggests he rest a little in the room to process everything. Klaus, still stunned by this revelation, can only quietly and uncertainly agree. He stood in the magnificent hall when, with a soft knock and a puff of smoke, the colossal figure of the sacred beast Jinbu shrank right before him. Now the tiny creature came up when he sat down and asked if he was okay, and Klaus, still stunned by the flood of memories, admitted that it was all too much to process at once. He began connecting the dots and aloud realized, probably that is why his magic differs from others, it needs a magic circle. Still confused, he turned to Jinbu and asked what it really means. Jinbu began explaining the basics of their world. He said that both humans and beasts are born with a source of magic man inside themselves, and all they need is to learn how to draw this innate power. But his method was completely different. Raised a glowing magic circle and now understood that it was drawing the surrounding mana of the world into himself and transforming it into his own useful power, a skill called mana transformation. It was this variabilitized ability to control the magic circle and transform the world's mana that was the defining trait of the demon lord. This unique method was the secret of his incredible strength. Jinbu explained that by drawing from an external source, he could use powerful healing magic without depleting his own reserves. A vision flashed in his mind where his past self realized that it was this vast, though different magical capacity that had given him his position. The last piece fit into place. He looked at the creature, a gentle smile blossomed on his face, and apologizing for forgetting, he said, "Finally, I remembered you, Jinbu." Jinbu, the creature, looked at him with gentle eyes and apologized for making him forget, then simply called Klaus master. Overwhelmed with emotions, Klaus rushed forward and hugged his old friend tightly, thanking Jinbu for waiting for him all this time. Then Jinbu asked his teacher to touch the gem embedded in his forehead. He explained that by touching the gem, his master's memories would emerge even more clearly. Klaus listened, and his face became serious. He felt the full weight of this moment. As soon as his fingers touched it, a powerful memory flashed through him about the first demon lord, Cecil. He saw a vision, a man and a woman leaving behind two small children crying. In the memory, the woman explained to the young Cecil that the parents were setting out on a journey precisely because he and his brothers and sisters were too important to them, and warned, if this continued, they would not survive. The truth settled in his consciousness. His parents left to protect the people dear to them. Following their example, he, as the first demon lord, tried to protect the whole world from. With the found purpose that firmly strengthened his resolve, Klaus returned to the present moment, his hand clenched into a hard fist, and from afar Ursula's voice sounded with confidence. She believed Klaus would manage. His mind cleared, he turned back to his companion. "Thank you, Jinbu," he said, his voice filled with new determination. "Let's return to the other sacred beasts." The creature responded with unwavering loyalty, its voice ringing with impatience. "Of course, my lord." Meanwhile, somewhere near the tall clock tower, Serafina, with a sparkle in her eyes, happily declared that she would join the journey. Her companion was worried and warned of danger, but she smiled broadly, waved it off, and assured that she was confident in her abilities. Her statement was met with resistance. Ursula firmly insisted that she must follow his orders, and Klaus, noticeably irritated, sharply told her not to refuse. In response, Serafina extends a round, exquisitely decorated magical device and with a sparkle in her voice explains that it is a teleportation tool. If something happens, it can be used to return to the castle, and she sincerely thanks for the trust in entrusting her with such a valuable item. The matter is settled. Ursula names the destination. Kirin was last seen in the kingdom of Hadant, where the holy beast was sealed by his guards, the Moslin family, near Akko. As he speaks, an image of a fierce black cat with two tails appears in the air, and Klaus readily agrees. They set off there. As they prepare to leave, Serafina's maid pulls her aside with worry on her face and quietly asks if it is really allowed, especially mentioning Kira. Serafina changes her expression. With a sly, almost cunning smile, she orders her attendant never to speak of this to Klaus and admits that she simply wants to repay a debt. When Klaus and Ursula stood ready to depart, before them appeared the great Saint Maria Folia in a solemn white dress and veil. She spoke a farewell blessing and asked that the divine protection of Kirin be upon them all. On the outskirts of the country, Huey Dent, a representative, addressed the crowd and announced that the holy Centifolia declared war on the Lord of Demons, but his voice grew somber as he added that their sacred beast, the white tiger, had already awakened and sensed their presence. He continued his passionate speech, proclaiming that the white tiger is the sacred animal of their nation and must be defeated to protect their homeland. In the crowd, the swordswoman Karen with braided hair stood silently, clenching her fists, her face a grim determination. The official's eyes narrowed in his mind. He admitted that he had asked to assign a guard to the seal, but suspected that the person already understood how serious everything was. In thoughts, Ursula, standing alone, seen from behind with a bow and quiver, the official conclusion grim, and the guards of Huey Dent are powerless in this matter. Meanwhile, far away, Klaus and Serafina travel through the forest on the back of the colossal Jinbu. Serafina enthusiastically enjoys the journey, and the smaller companion lizard, also named Jinbu, notes how strangely smooth the ride is. He turns to Serafina with a bright smile, asks her what kind of country Huey Dent is, and admits that he eagerly looks forward to meeting the white tiger. The conversation continued. The little Jinbu explained that 90 of Huey is forest, so the place breathes sacredness and natural generosity. Klaus aloud wondered if Karen would like to go with him, and the maid nearby blushed and exclaimed that she would gladly go. Jinbu noticed that her words sounded sincere. Noticing the servant's sincere reaction, Klaus turned to Ursula, who had joined their company, and asked directly, "Are you worried about Karen?" He listens as Ursula orders to contact the guild through their communicator as soon as they settle in Huey Dent. Klaus thanks him, and Ursula waves it off indifferently. The conversation ended. The group moved on foot, their boots confidently stomping along the forest path. Diving deeper, Klaus looks admiringly at the vast expanses of the forest, observes the local wildlife, and notices that Huey Dent is a nation that truly values coexistence with nature. Serafina adds to his thought, explaining that to protect this natural balance, the country has skilled archers known as hunters. Ursel says that people minimize logging to receive the forest's blessing, and this changes how adventurers must act now. Serafina is delighted, and Klaus, deeply impressed, understands that the country is truly protected by the forest itself. The realization was cut short. Panic appeared on the group's faces. Ursel shouted about a pure white barrier, and at that moment a volley of shining arrows appeared from the air, flying straight at them. Serafina recoiled in shock. Klaus does not understand the sudden hostility and asks aloud if this means the hunters are their enemies, as he cannot imagine this attack as anything but a misunderstanding. Ursel quickly corrects his assumption and urges, "Faster, use your power." When Klaus looks around confused, Ursel clarifies which abilities he means: regeneration, limit break, and mystical awakening, and behind them the volley of arrows froze in the air. He instantly sprang into action while his companions only watched. Serafina, frowning with worry, asked Ursel, noting that Klaus's abilities are limited to healing magic for living beings. She wondered how he could possibly cope with a hail of arrows. Ursel remained confident and simply said that Klaus would find a way. Hovering in the air, he focused all his senses and spread his attention to catch the flow of mana around. His search revealed the source: an extremely skilled hunter located a whole kilometer away. Realizing that dodging such a fierce barrage was impossible, he prepared a countermeasure. A shining sign formed in his palm. He sharply pushed his hands forward and released the spell Explosion. 2 magical circles instantly appeared in the path of the arrows, detonating the projectiles with a series of fiery bursts, preventing them from reaching the targets. Despite his efforts, the arrows were getting closer and closer. Their proximity was already becoming a serious threat. Below, Ursel explained to the stunned Serafina that Klaus had provoked static electricity in the air to cause the explosions, and Serafina could only marvel admiringly that such power was within the reach of healing magic. In response to the relentless assault, a new force burst forth. Huge roots erupted from the power floor, twisting and growing at an unnatural speed under the influence of the spell of infinite growth. The giant roots came to life and formed a living shield, intercepting the last arrows. One of the offshoots gently wrapped around Klaus and lifted him up, and he looked on, stunned. Sudden defense completely caught the distant archer by surprise. He found himself in the clutches of the very forest he sought to conquer. The magical roots wrapped around his limbs, and he looked up, unable to believe his eyes. He wondered whom Ursel had brought as an ally, for he had never before seen such powerful and unusual magic. Ursel greets the newcomer Shuya with a knowing smile, says that they really know each other, and reproaches Shuya for always trying to win by strange means. Nearby, Klaus with Uroboros on his shoulder looks on in surprise and realizes that this attacker is the long-awaited guardian of the Demon Lord. The subdued archer is interrogated by Ursel, whether he was told in advance that a guard would come to the western country for no reason, and the young man, sweating profusely, stammers. In response, he throws himself to the ground in a deep, loud bow, shouting a desperate apology. Klaus, standing nearby, shudders with surprise at this sudden and excessive display of repentance. Versailles calmly asks him to pull himself together, assures that no one is accusing him, orders the archer to listen to their version of events and then decide for himself, while Serafina silently watches the conversation. Klaus looks on, his face thoughtful. He says that despite everything, Shia is incredibly strong and sincerely rejoices that from now on they will fight together. Hearing these words, the archer raises his head, eyes wide open with emotion, and silently notices the sad expression on the other's face. The archer froze in stunned silence. Klaus leaned over and firmly shook his hand, his face bright with a friendly smile, and said once again how glad he was that they would become allies. The archer, overwhelmed with emotions, solemnly knelt down, introduced himself as the guardian Shia Moslin, and swore his body and soul to Klaus. This statement confused Klaus, and Ursel, smiling, advised Shia to simply call him Klaus and speak plainly, but Klaus intervened and said that it was an order. He looks a bit stunned by Shia's passionate acceptance, but confirms that such an arrangement suits him, and Shia, almost glowing with admiration, exclaims that it is a great honor for her to receive an order from the Lord of Demons who watches over them, and Ursel notes how quickly everything has changed. As they walk through the forest, Ursel anxiously advises that rumors about the arrival of the Demon Lord have probably already spread throughout the country, so Klaus should avoid cities for now, and Shur agrees, surprised that someone could arrive so quickly, and admits that he himself did not feel their approach. Their path is stopped by what they see. On a nearby hill stands the silhouette of a large, roaring beast. Klaus anxiously asks if the white tiger is already rampaging. Shia confirms that the creature has already gone mad and that it is only a matter of time before it is sealed in a magical barrier. Behind them, Serafina, with a grim expression, urgently urges them to hurry, saying that the fierce monster is not the real problem. Approaching the hill, they learn the truth. The white tiger is not raging, it is bound with thick ropes and pierced with numerous arrows. A figure in a cloak stands over the tormented animal as part of a cruel ritual of subjugation, and Klaus looks in horror, unable to believe his eyes. Serafina explains that the situation is terrible. This monster is the sacred guardian of this land, and if it dies, the land itself will wither. The real problem is not it, but the nobles who torture it, and they must be stopped. Hearing this, Ursel clenches his hand into a fist. He thinks his warning was not heard, and fully blames himself for his lack of strength. He turns to Klaus with a look full of pity and says that a barrier has appeared in the forest that they cannot remove. He apologizes and says that if he had acted earlier, this could have been avoided, and Shia tries to comfort Klaus and asks him not to blame himself. Ursel turns to the archer Shia Moslin with pleading eyes. Will he save their white tiger, and asks him to first bring the beast to consciousness. Before Shia can respond, Klaus steps forward with a confident smile. Uroboros perched on his shoulder, and he assures them that this is exactly why they came. With a clear purpose, the group confidently walks down the central street of Huides. Going further, Ursel explains that any interference with the barrier requires a magical tool from the guild, but their conversation is suddenly interrupted by a stern official who stands across their path and blocks their way. The official looks down coldly while Shia angrily insists that the barrier is not a simple magical thing, and he declares that the Duchy of Ahan will handle the white tiger and demands that this matter be left to them. His calm cracks. He thinks about what a person without comrades can do, and a drop of sweat appears on his temple because he realizes he can call for reinforcements from the family. Suddenly, the official grabs Shuya by the collar, disdainfully brushing off the archer as an incompetent guard, and announces that since he is useless, the demon lord himself has offered to tame the beast instead. Vows froze. The official's words echoed in his head for a long time, and he realized they were talking about him and his healing magic. And when they turned and left, he felt a bitter, familiar parallel between Shia's situation and his own past. He sat on the back of the great beast and wrote, listening to how Ouroboros spoke about how long it took to obtain this magical artifact. While his thoughts were about the archer, why such a strong person as Shuya behaves this way, he could not understand. Shiraya, on the other hand, saw himself as nothing more than a helpless guard. He explained that he was simply chosen from the clan for this role when he was only 16. He remembered how the beauty of the forest moved him, and he felt deep pride at the thought that he would become the guardian of this land. But his dream was disdainfully interrupted by a voice. When he tried something new, he was met only with contempt. Other adventurers discouraged him from using magic, calling it dangerous. He tried to explain that since his specialty was fire magic, he was trying to combine it with archery. The memory would not let go. Around him were guildmates, even the guild master Ursel, but no one trusted him, and as a guard he felt completely alone. The memory faded, and he stood with his back to the very people he was supposed to protect, unrecognized and unnoticed. From afar, Klaus watched, and his face softened with understanding. He approached the archer and explained his insight. He told Shuya that his fighting style was harmony, like the forest itself, but others were wary because they did not feel it. Klaus finally understood why Shuya lacked confidence. Looking up with a warm, reassuring smile, he told Shia that everything was fine and promised him that he would definitely find friends. This unexpected kindness stunned the archer. He could not utter a word. Tears glistened in his eyes. He tells Shuya that everything that happened in the past no longer matters, and Serafina excitedly adds, urging Shuya to use this battle to show everyone how incredible he is. His words touched the strings in the young archer's soul. With a determined smile and tears in his eyes, Shia agrees, understanding that this very moment will show what he is worth as a guardian. While he was gathering his courage, the lizard companion Jin Bu threw out that it seems we are late, and added that the nobles we met earlier are already in place. His warning sounds just at the moment when Shuya and Serafina notice the scene ahead. To their stunned admiration, in the distance Klaus and Ursula stand on the back of the colossal sacred beast Jinbu and watch as everything unfolds. Before them, a majestic white tiger caught in a trap roars in pain and writhes in heavy chains driven into the ground. The nobles surround the beast and tighten its bonds, and in Klaus's head, from horror, there is only one urgent command. Save the white tiger. Before the crowd of hunters, a huge white tiger, the sacred guardian, roars in pain, bound by heavy chains, and Shia Moslin looks with horror, realizing that the barrier is broken and they must help. Among the crowd, Klaus steps forward, places his hand on his heart, and boldly announces that he is the Lord of Demons and from now on will take command, while in the background Commander Fowl mocks him, calling him a fool. He turns to Fowl and apologizes for the sudden interference. Fowl, impatient, simply tells the self-proclaimed Lord of Demons to get to work faster. The announcement stunned those present. Shia looks with wide-open eyes, not believing it, and Commander Fowl's face turns into a mask of pure shock and outrage. The shock quickly turned into rage, disgusting smiles and mockery. How do they now want the white tiger to obey? He raises a whip-like rod and threatens to beat the beast into submission himself. She can strike, she shouts to him, wait, and he urgently explains that the hunters will not be able to protect themselves in such an open place if the situation escalates. The confrontation intensified. Serafina stepped forward, the round artifact in her hand quietly glowed, and she calmly said, wait, I found this prey first. The artifact flashed and instantly created a shimmering magical barrier that enveloped the white tiger in chains. The sudden surge of power stunned the hunters. They felt the beast's roars inside the cage growing louder. She stands firm, her magic unfolding in two barriers, one of mist, the other of sacred energy, restraining the white tiger. Klaus turns to his small companion Jin Bu and orders him to protect the hunters together with Serafina, and Jin Bu nods, accepting the command. The sudden appearance of the magical shield shocked the hunters. They suddenly found themselves saved. Shia Moslin looks puzzled. Serafina urgently calls everyone to flee into the forest, and he decisively demands, who is she? Ignoring his question, she shockingly declares that she is an ally of the Demon Lord, and with a stern expression on her face calls them once again to hurry and escape. Inside the barrier, the white tiger let out a fierce roar, its colossal strength bursting outward, striking against the magical bonds. The beast rages. Shia turns to Klaus with a confident smile and reassuringly says that his help is important and that everything is fine. In the distance, other hunters whisper, wondering what is happening here. He addressed his comrades. With the arrival of the Demon Lord, now they can breathe easy. He ordered to head to the forest, deciding to trust the course of events to bring the people to safety. As his people retreat, Shia draws his massive blade sparkling with energy and announces that he will face the formidable thunderous power of the monster himself, preparing to absorb its attack while Klaus watches, stunned. Suddenly, a tree nearby explodes into splinters. A young woman is thrown back and falls to the ground, screaming in terror. The noise scares the retreating hunters, and Shia's confidence shatters. He sharply turns his head and anxiously calls Klaus and the others. When an invisible strike fell on him, the man in the dark cloak reacted instantly. He stretched out his hand forward, and a complex magical sign flashed, releasing a wave of protective energy as he pronounced the spell's name. Extreme Flame Blood. The explosion dissipated, but the fleeing woman remained unharmed, though greatly frightened. The cloaked man asked if she was okay, and after she hesitantly answered, yes, he insisted she hurry into the forest. When she looked back, her eyes widened in shock, and a spark of recognition flashed across her face as she noticed his blue robe. He noticed the other hunters felled by the attack. One groaned in pain while a comrade tried to support him. A gentle, healing light enveloped them as the man in the cloak uttered another spell, full healing, instantly sealing their wounds. The sudden manifestation of powerful magic seemed to calm the huge white tiger. The beast, which a moment ago was raging, froze, its gaze fixed on the event, and the dark crystal in its forehead sparkled. When the immediate threat to the hunters was removed, the man in the cloak and the archer Shia finally found themselves face to face in a small clearing. We finally meet, the man in the cloak said in a steady tone. You no longer paid attention to the archer, instead shifting your gaze to the sacred guardian. The tiger growled quietly in warning and bared its fangs, but the young man, unafraid, spoke directly to the beast. Wait, tiger, I will help you now. Before Shia could grasp his intention, Cape Man summoned another power, infinite growth. The ground around the archer exploded. Thick, knotted vines rapidly burst from beneath the soil and, twisting in the air, entwined him. The vines instantly grew and wove a dense wooden cage, completely immobilizing the stunned archer. The goal achieved, the man in the cloak calmly stood on the back of the now submissive white tiger and looked down at his captive enemies. He stood before the tamed tiger and the trapped archer, a satisfied smile on his face. How good, he thought, that everyone was here to witness this memorable conclusion. His moment of satisfaction was shattered by the furious scream of the man in the fur-collared coat. He growled that no one should dare interfere, and at that moment an arrow flew through the air toward the tiger. Shoya released the projectile, though he was still entangled in magical vines. The archer managed to shoot, a grim determination frozen on his face, and Klaus watched with wide eyes, not believing this decisive act. The arrow hit the target with a heavy, dull thud. The white tiger broke free with a painful roar as the arrow struck the crystal embedded in its forehead, and consciousness began to fade. The man in the fur-trimmed coat froze, stunned by this catastrophic failure. No one had yet recovered when a colossal dark silhouette descended from above, struck the stunning tiger with incredible force, pinning it to the ground, and the spectators screamed in shock. The beast was felled with a single blow. But he watched the spectacle with pure admiration. A broad smile shone on his face, and he loudly admired the stunning power of the magical emperor. His reaction confused the crowd. People whispered that the white tiger was defeated and that Ursel also came out for this training. Jinbu proudly declared that it was the power of his master. But the official in the fur collar turned his anger on the bound Shuya, hissing that it was his merit, and regretted that if only Shuya had caught the tiger, they would have gained enormous wealth and fame. He sharply grabs the young archer Shuya and demands to know why the magical emperor was brought here, and the official, with a distrustful look, asks if the hunters now act as a team. He calmly explains that the hunters have nothing to protect themselves with, so they are forced to cover each other's backs. Fighting to protect comrades, he says, is the way of this country. The official waved him off, his face twisted with contempt. He accused Shia of throwing the hunters into danger just to satisfy his selfish whims. He clenched his teeth and resolutely declared that he would report the whole incident to the guild. His boss was momentarily silent from surprise, but anger quickly broke through. He could not understand how someone could be so incompetent that Shuya dared to speak to him that way. His tirade was interrupted by a female hunter who stepped forward and shouted at him. She reminded him that they were told to protect the country, asked if he really believed they only cared about themselves, and accused him of lying. Stunned by the open challenge, the official trembled. At that moment, Klaus appeared nearby and calmly said that he was only saying what Shia told him, and a glowing magical circle lit up at the official's feet. An explosive trap materialized. He looked down at the frightened man and resolutely declared that he would not allow him to interfere with the tiger hunt. Klaus said he would take all necessary measures as he saw fit, and the official, overwhelmed with fear, stammered, uttering, "Magical Emperor." When the official was neutralized, Shia turned to Klaus and thanked him for dealing with that foolish duke and clearing the way so they could handle the white tiger, which lay weakened on the forest floor. Then Klaus approached the giant creature and placed his hand on its wounded back. Under his palm appeared a glowing magical sign, and he began to cast a powerful healing spell, Full Restoration. As soon as the spell took effect, a faceted gemstone appeared on the tiger's forehead. With a flash of light, its eyes suddenly opened. The forced release of hidden magical power was complete. The white tiger is now fully alert. The new hall glows brightly, and Klaus calmly watches, acknowledging that the creature has regained consciousness. To his surprise, the tiger spoke, its voice resonating with ancient power. It called him by his full name, Klaus Finley, and said that in this life he was its master. When the bond was finally sealed, Klaus stepped forward and firmly embraced the great beast, apologizing for being late. The tiger gently rubbed against him in response, accepting him. The white tiger, slightly mocking, tells Klaus that he has a stubborn character. Then it turns its gaze to the nearby companion lizard Jinbu and notes that Jinbu has too sharp a tongue for a familiar. It continues, "It is obvious to everyone Klaus is its master, so it offers him to sit and ride, but immediately orders Jinbu to run away." Jinbu replies that the tiger must let everyone ride because they are all servants of the same master. He stretched out his hand, his palms sank into the thick, soft fur of the white tiger. The beast stood proudly, the new stone gleamed, and he asked his new master, "Isn't its coat the most magnificent of all?" A smile spread across his face as he gently stroked the creature's head. The tiger declared that only Klaus could touch it, and this amusingly reminded him of his sister Karen's possessive habits. With a decisive movement, he mounted the huge animal again and, addressing those standing at the edge of the clearing, called out, "All right, let's return to the city and report." On the main street of Huey Dent, Klaus Pat's huge white tiger tells the creature that they have arrived and immediately prepares to report to the local guild. The street is teeming with people. There are so many that he can only marvel at the size of the crowd. Next to him, Shia Moslin asks aloud, "Is this noise because of him, since he is the vessel of the demon lord?" Suddenly, a blond man with slick back hair appeared and addressed him. "Your Majesty, Alfred." Klaus froze, realizing he was face to face with the prince of this country. Alfred nodded to ask Shia to relax, then turned to Klaus and asked him to tell everyone that in this official setting such stiff formality could be avoided. Then Alfred addresses Klaus directly and gently, saying that he is just like everyone else in this country, so he should be treated the same as others, and adds that there is a pleasant, refreshing atmosphere in the country. Does Klaus feel it too? He explains his appearance. He heard that the seal on the sacred white tiger was in danger, so he hurried to figure it out. Looking at the calm animal next to Klaus, he smiles. The tiger has already returned to its usual state. The prince is a little embarrassed, admitting that he was just about to track down a daughter but got distracted and sincerely thanks. Overwhelmed with emotions, Klaus insists that he only wants to be treated like any other citizen, and Alfred laughs, agreeing to reconsider his approach. His face becomes truly serious. He insists that Klaus saved the country, and for that he should at least be allowed to express the slightest gratitude. Embarrassed by the royal gratitude, he stammered and whispered nervously a simple answer, "Yes, thank you." They agree to go to the castle, but Klaus suddenly announces that he has a message. He points to a bound, sweaty man nearby and names him Dukahan. Prince Alfred's face turned to stone when Klaus explained that the Duke used hunters for his own selfish purposes, trying to subdue the white tiger and cause this sacred creature needless pain. He explained that Dukahan tried to subdue the white tiger instead of Shui, and the Duke's face twisted with panic. And then the silence was broken by the voice of a young woman. She stepped forward, called the Duke father, and stated as a fact he used the hunters for his own plans. She throws it in his face, asks him not to look for excuses for Shui, and asks if he really understood how useless Shui was, and the Duke sweats and is unable to give any answer. Her appearance awakens a memory in Klaus. He recognizes the same princess he once saved. Nearby, Shia says she is a good person who helped the hunters Klaus had to abandon. The princess confidently looked at the group and resolutely said, "I vouch for him." She explains that Shia's actions were not at all as the public thought. Embarrassed by the praise, Shia stammers and says he was just trying to protect everyone. His reaction prompts Alfred to take a step forward. He praises him for excellent work and forgives all previous offenses, declaring him a wonderful guard. This leaves Shiyu stunned and blushing. He turned his attention to Duke Ahan and passed the sentence. His title was taken away. He was sent into exile on his own lands and strictly warned never to step beyond their borders again. When the disgraced Duke is led away, everyone joyfully celebrates the just outcome. The princess happily takes Shia by the arm. Alfred pats him on the back, and a light relief envelops the company. Gathering his thoughts, Alfred declared that enough of all these troubles for today, ordered them to find lodging and rest, and promised a proper reward later. Klaus gratefully agreed. Their animal companions, on the other hand, have a different, festive idea. The white tiger and the lizard enthusiastically suggest holding a festive banquet that very night. Shia gladly agrees and smiles. This is exactly the celebration to mark the return of the white tiger to the capital of the demon lord, and the princess turns to Klaus and gently encourages him, "Relax and wait for the festivities." Their plans are suddenly interrupted by the appearance of Ursula. He descends from above, addresses Klaus as the Lord of Demons, tells him to stop what he is doing, saying it is unbecoming of him, and then calls Klaus and Shulia to follow him in the direction. Klaus and Shia found themselves in a huge, luxurious ballroom sparkling under the glow of a magnificent chandelier, and Klaus's eyes were wide open in amazement at the scale and splendor of this gathering. He stammers and says that it is his first time at such a party and he feels completely out of place here, while Shia, looking much calmer, notes that for him it is simply long ago. Everyone immediately noticed the young woman descending the stairs. Klaus instantly recognized her as Princess Milia and admired how different and beautiful she looked in festive attire. She shines with a smile and calls her older brother to look at her. Bewildered by her radiance, Klaus can only think that Karen would also look just as charming in that dress. His plan is interrupted by Shuya. She correctly guesses that he was thinking about Karen. With a sly smile, she pulls out a small rectangular communicator, surprising Klaus. He explains that the same device was also delivered to Karen and advises Klaus to try contacting her later. Grateful, Klaus takes the device and thanks her warmly. A moment of silence is suddenly broken when a crowd of nobles unexpectedly surrounds Klaus. They call him by various titles: Clausen, nephew, and even Demon Lordzima, and he is completely panicked. The nobles approach closer, bombarding him with questions from rumors and legends. Someone asks if it is true that he brought Jinbu in a storage sack. Another asks if he really defeated the Minotaur King alone. Klaus, sweating and with wide-open eyes, is overwhelmed by his own fame. From the excessive attention, his head spun and his vision blurred while the aristocrats pressed around. Behind him, Shia and Ursula simply urged him to endure. Some guest had mistaken him for a guild master. His mind raced, panic engulfed him from the sheer number of people. He silently begged Selena for help, wondering where she could be. Suddenly, a strong hand grabbed him by the elbow and pulled him away from the throne. It was Princess Milia. She asked if he was all right, noticing that he clearly did not like being the center of attention. In the quiet courtyard of Hugh Denta's castle, Selena stood alone and, speaking into the communication device, asked the person on the other end if it was really okay that she was missing the party. The voice belonged to Karen Finley. She had sat up in bed, filled with joy, confessing that she had long wanted to talk to Selena, and Selena responded with the same warmth. Walking under the moonlight through the rose garden, Selena explained that Klaus had given her the device that allowed them to talk that night, and then said there was something she wanted to discuss. Karen's expression changed, her cheeks flushed with a blush. She looked at her device and immediately got to the point. "Selena, you like my brother, don't you?" The sharp question left Selena speechless. Her cheeks reddened because the vivid memory of that first meeting, when she hugged her tightly with tears in her eyes, surfaced. "I apologize for surprising you like this, Karen," she said, holding a small pendant. "My feelings are a bit different, not romantic. It's more of a respectful admiration." She continues through the communication device, frankly saying that Klaus is very important to her. Karen remains completely confused, her face reddens and she stammers, trying to respond. Sitting on the bed, she tries to make sense of it. Klaus is important to her like an older brother, but in reality, they are not related. Selena lets her thoughts drift to the memory of the smiling classmate who is always nearby and thinks what a miracle this love is that grew over the years. Returning to the conversation, she says to Karen with a bright smile that she adores such stories and eagerly asks to hear more, causing Karen to blush with embarrassment. A soft smile melted on her face as she thought about how kind Klaus had become, and she told Karen how glad she was to hear that. It seems this finally convinced Karen. She lifts her gaze with new determination and tells Alina that she wants her and Klaus to be happy. Mutual understanding sparks between them. Together they declare one goal: to definitely break the curse of the Ouroboros, and Karen nods resolutely. She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening in surprise. A little further down the wide arched corridor stood Klaus and a young woman she recognized, Princess Melia. Princess Melia led him to the doors, explaining that behind them was the royal family's private resting room, and opened one. He entered and his gaze immediately fell on the lavish canopy bed. The luxury of this room, he thought, could rival the chambers of the demon lord himself. Settling on the plush sofa opposite the princess, who had changed into an elegant dress, he was completely confused. She assured him they could talk for a long time now, and he felt gratitude but even more embarrassment, because how did everyone seem to know about him and where to even start explaining? Princess Melia smiled, clarifying that her information was from Ursula and Alfred, and confessed that having met Klaus in person, she was so impressed that she immediately understood they were telling the truth. She explained that as part of learning to know her country, her father ordered her to live and act as a huntress, and it was in this role that she heard rumors about the guardian beast, believed them, and asked Shia to join Duke Ahan's squad to tame it. Her face darkened at the thought of the archer. She bitterly regretted not trying to understand him earlier. Perhaps then she could have stopped him. Turning her gaze back to Klaus, she sincerely smiled and thanked him. Everyone was safe only because he and his companions appeared just in time. She continues, saying that she was completely stunned by his healing magic, his personality, and how carefully he treats his comrades. She boldly declares that she is convinced he is the only one who can be her partner. Klaus steps back in shock, his mind spinning from the word partner. Leaning closer and smiling hopefully, she blushes and asks him to accept her. He can only look back, sweating and completely confused by this sudden proposal. He lowers his eyes, stammers, and apologizes, and although he values her feelings, he says he never even thought about marriage and is currently completely unable to do so. Indifferent to his refusal, she pushes him back onto the bed, leans over him, and says that if it doesn't work now, they will do it anyway. Will that be a problem? She has already received her father's consent, and while she speaks, suddenly the door to the room creaked and opened. His heart pounds in his chest, panic builds. He realizes how terrible it looks, pressed by the princess at the very moment someone enters. When Milio whispered his name, thoughts raced in all directions. Who could it be? A familiar voice cut through the tension. "Brother." Klaus looked up, his eyes wide with horror. He realized that his sister, Karen, had just entered and caught him in a compromising scene. Klaus wakes up in bed and sees Princess Milia next to him. Frightened, he raises his eyes because she is calling him by name, and a communication device lies on the table nearby. Before he can react, she hugs him tightly and with a bright, determined look introduces herself as Milia, the first princess of the kingdom of Huey Dent, boldly declaring that she will become his sister. A moment is interrupted by a voice from the communicator. Karen appears on the screen wearing a mask, her eyes wide with shock. She demands to know what her brother is doing. Embarrassed, Klaus asks her to wait, realizing that everything looks terrible. Turning his gaze from the screen to Princess Milia, he panics over the terrible coincidence and apologizes profusely, explaining that although he has no excuse, he absolutely cannot allow his sister to hate him. She listens to his sincere plea and her face softens with understanding. She assures him that she understands, confessing that she also does not want to lose her dear family. She responded decisively. Although she is leaving now, she has no intention of giving up and added that she does not want to be disliked. Nothing will stop her. He says he has no time to worry about anything, only about lifting his sister's curse. He allows her to use the room freely, and when she leaves, he returns to the device and a fierce determination flashes across his face. He tells Karen to wait and promises to fix everything. At the other end of the connection, Karen's face is a mask of icy anger. She looks from the screen and demands to know who that princess is, and in a small window, Klaus recoils in horror, realizing that his sister is now in a truly terrible mood. The brother's voice through the device continued explaining, telling how he was surrounded at the party and then rescued, and also told her that he learned about his fate from the princess herself. She listened without looking away while he continued, aloud asking how nobles from another country could have known about him at all. She was silent, absorbing every word he said. His face appeared on the screen and he confessed. He said that he was the one who asked Ursel to publicize his achievements. His eyes widened with stress. He did not understand why he was being treated like a criminal force. She finally answered, saying that if his reputation grows, he will stand out, and she finds it unpleasant. Yet she admitted that she wants to be his support and believes that over time everyone will start to see him positively. She squeezed the communication device tighter and said with regret that, not being able to be with him, this is the least she can do to support him. She, moved by that confession, spoke to her, saying how kind she is and insisted that she is the most important person in the world. Damn it. A blush crept up her cheeks as she listened to his sincere words. Her earlier anger disappeared, leaving place for a bright smile. Clutching the device in her hands, she joyfully exclaimed that she feels the same. She confirms that now they will communicate daily. Noticing that he works as a receptionist, she insists that he rest well, and after the last good night, their conversation ends. After the conversation, Klaus fell onto the bed and sighed heavily. He remembered that he wanted to ask her to stop spreading rumors about him. She steals his determination, but if that is so, he realizes he will have to work harder to live up to the reputation she has created. Later that night, after the party ended, he cautiously peeked from behind the door, checking if it was safe to return to his room. Under the starry sky, he heads back to the end, and the closer he gets, the louder he proclaims his return. In his room, he finds a white tiger and Ouroboros on the bed. They are already waiting for him. The tiger gently greets him, says he almost dozed off waiting, and then orders Klaus to touch the gem to contact Cecil. Klaus reached out and touched the object. Blinding light burst from it and scattered into countless fragments. Suddenly, delight transports him to another place. He finds himself before ancient ruins along with Ursel, Princess Milia, Shia Moslin, and others. Ursel says this is Lemuel's sanctuary, and stunned Klaus presses his lips together and firmly resolves to solve this as soon as possible to return home. He and his companions materialized in a huge ruined hall where crumbling columns stretched into the darkness. Before them loomed a monstrous multi-headed dragon, its gigantic body coiled around a Jew's. One of the heads lowered, its snake-like eyes fixed on a small group. The dragon, as if mocking the frailty of humans, demanded to know their purpose. The sight of the beast carried pure terror through him. He recognized the sinister dragon Ouroboros. The very malice of its magic suffocated him. But even as fear nearly paralyzed him, another force exploded within, fierce determination to overthrow this creature. Suddenly, a powerful force exploded in the room. The dragon laughed hoarsely, and its laughter echoed off the broken stones. Klaus's companions were knocked off their feet, barely holding on amid the chaos, and the beast, with contempt in its voice, declared that they were alone and mockingly asked what they could do now. The desperate situation triggered a memory. He saw himself as Cecil, begging the young Marin to flee, imploring her to run, even if she would be the only one able to escape. She turned to him, her face showing sadness and tenderness. With a quiet smile, she asked him to take care of the children, and her last words were a simple, sincere confession of love. The memory reached its terrible end. He helplessly watched as blinding energy tore space apart and ripped Marin and another young girl away from him, and in his head echoed his own voice, shouting her name with a desperate, futile cry as they disappeared. She froze. The colossal dragon before him suddenly lit up, its body wrapped in ethereal ribbons of light. A powerful spell unfolded in the chamber, the Eternal Seal. The seal, however, proved insufficient. With a terrible crunch, the massive jaws of the dragon snapped shut, breaking the magical bonds. From the fracture burst a shard of dark energy, and Klaus shielded his eyes from the flash. When the dragon's powers broke free, another presence was felt. A creature of pure white with a mane and tail of celestial fire materialized and stood before them, standing with supernatural grace, and a single horn spiraled from its masked face. The appearance of this new being triggered a flood of memories in Klaus, throwing him back to another time, another tragedy. He was a child again, eyes full of horror, voice trembling as he called one name. He remembered the beast from that day, and its name whispered in his mind, Crew. He and Marin were just children, thrown into the very heart of an uncontrollable whirlwind of power roaring around them. The memory became sharper, more painful. He fell to his knees, beating the ground in despair and calling Marina's name, and a crushing weight of his own helplessness overwhelmed him, a feeling he never forgot. He turned his face covered with tear streaks to the beast, his voice choked with sobs. He begged for forgiveness and swore that he would never ever leave it alone again, while Marina lay motionless on the cold ground nearby. The boy sobbed as an invisible figure stretched out a hand and grabbed the fallen star-shaped object, feeling the pure, strong magic emanating from it. The beast, Crew, turned its gaze to the boy in the cloak, a silent witness to the echoes of the past. Ursula's loud laughter abruptly pulled him out of his memories, and Klaus only looked on with disbelief, muttering whether this could be true. The laughter fades nearby. A red-haired man bursts into a strong, convulsive cough, and Klaus barely supports him. When he hoarsely utters the name Albert, Ursula raises the shining star-shaped object, and its light grows even brighter. The scene dissolves into another memory. Klaus stands with Marin before the mythical beast Crew. The memory shifts, and he finds himself under the crowd's ovation. After sealing the Ouroboros, he became known as Cecil, leader of the demon hunters, and everyone celebrated him. The entire burden of past glory and present crisis falls upon him. Tears roll down his face, he gasps for breath, and a voice calls his name, trying to break through his turmoil. His mind dives into the past when he was still a boy, weak and sick in bed. A small tiger creature named Kylan was nearby. He weakly asks if the master is in pain somewhere, and when Kylan confirms it, he rejoices with relief that they knew and could help. It turned out that Kylan was the familiar of Saint Marin. The true purpose of the familiar was to be a vessel for her power, and Kylan's role was to become a direct seal against the Ouroboros, but his power had not yet matured, so he was told he was needed only for purification. The memory returns again to the image of the youth with hands folded in prayer. He thanks, acknowledging that Kylan protected them all from Ouroboros, and then with sincere hope pleads for protection for a girl named Karen. His prayer seems to echo in the endless, empty sky, where a barely audible, sad apology hangs in the air. On a city street, Klaus walks with a book in his hands, and on his forearm rests the small tiger familiar Kylan, when suddenly his former boss Fowl appears before him and angrily exclaims that Klaus has already bought too much, insists they return to the group, and grumbles that the teleportation device is too expensive and an ordinary carriage would have been enough. He grabs Klaus by the shoulder and impatiently calls out his name. Klaus remains silent and stands aside from Fowl and his two subordinates, who watch from behind. When the Falsemen try to forcibly pull Klaus back to the magical core, suddenly a powerful shockwave bursts out. It sweeps him away. Princess Milia stands with her hand outstretched. She is the source of this protective magic. The sudden intervention left behind a foul hissing and confusion. Everyone demanded to know what was happening. His subordinates, recovering from the explosion, angrily questioned who this young woman was. She calmly asks if they tried to kidnap Klaus, saying that his wonderful presence touched her so much that she followed. With a critical look, she adds that they are probably inept since they did not recognize his true value. Her commanding words made the man fall silent. Standing behind her, Klaus exhaled with relief, grateful for her unexpected recovery. He stumbles and falls to the ground, raising a surprised look at her while Kylan sits down nearby, and Princess Milia looks down and politely asks permission to help with his sister. Her face softened and blossomed into a bright, encouraging smile. She enthusiastically offered to search for Kylan together, and Klaus, now holding both a small tiger cub and a turtle-like Genbu, raised his eyes to her. A spark of hope shone in his gaze. He studies the map following Princess Milia's hints, and their companion Alfred confirms his suspicions. For the first time, he feels Kylan's magical presence nearby. Preparing for the search, Klaus sincerely thanks Alfred for providing them with the latest model of long-distance communication devices, and Milia calmly takes on the faculty's equipment issues, saying it's a given. After setting up the communication devices, Klaus decisively gives the order to move out. Alfred commands the group, now joined by a dark-haired adventuress, to split up and each thoroughly search their own area, and she readily agrees. Walking alone through the dense forest, she suddenly hears a rustle in the nearby bushes and sharply turns toward the sound. Her eyes widen with surprise upon seeing it, and touching the communicator near her ear, she quietly whispers that she has found what they were looking for. Before her in the body of water stands a shining mythical beast formed from ethereal energy. The traveler's face tightens with determination. She thinks they have finally met, whispers a word to her mother that no one heard, and proclaims that now it is her turn. She is ready to fulfill her duty. Selena stands before the tavern like the burden of a saint, looking at the small thing in her hand with a firm expression. Resigned to her fate and gathered all her resolve to become Kylan, she knows that she must bear this burden alone. This is a message for Klaus. Meanwhile, Alfred sincerely speaks with Selena and asks permission for him and his comrades to stay nearby, in case she needs them, and she thanks him with a hint of fatigue and apologizes for the trouble she causes the man named Hector. There, Klaus enthusiastically tells Karen. He says he asked Selena for help. Karen shines, fists clenched. She is happy both for Selena and because of her own involvement. In a moment of solitude, Selena raises her eyes and a barely noticeable, determined smile plays on her face. Just a little more, she thinks. Deep in the forest, Klaus rides swiftly on a white tiger, sees a figure in the distance and suddenly shouts, "I found her," and the tiger urges him, "Climb on and hurry." They approach and Klaus's mind is torn by thoughts. How to get Iroko this scale? He knows he must try. Ahead he sees Selena's silhouette shrouded in a dark, ominous aura. Suddenly from where Selena stood, a blinding flash of light exploded and Klaus covered his eyes, and from that glow in the puddle of water materialized a small white mythical beast with a horned mask on its face and a blazing mane. What is this light? Klaus exclaimed in surprise. Shock recedes, recognition comes. Killen, he shouts without hesitation, giving the order. White tiger, hold him back with your lightning. The great animal lets out a mighty roar, accepts the order, and prepares to strike. They watched as Kylan dashed away at incredible speed, a white and fiery spot. The white tiger and Ouroboros felt his speed and power, and nearby a traveler explained that the saint now possesses Kylan's magic and asked if Klaus intends to catch that creature. In response, he called out to Kylan, then turned the order to his companions, "Both of you forward," and sent the white tiger and little Jinbu to rush ahead to intercept the mythical creature. But before his guards could reach the target, the swordswoman with the scythe rushed past them, sharply leaping high into the air. She caught Kylan on the fly and instantly disappeared into the sky. She was looking, not believing, and exclaiming that it could fly. The woman next to him, however, had a plan. She asked for time, promising to catch Kylan and bring him his scale. All she needed was his trust. Klaus, looking at her determined gaze, agreed. The swordswoman with a braided braid landed nearby and threw a few words about Kylan's magic. Turning to Klaus with a gentle smile, she apologized and waved it off, saying it was nothing, and he remained stunned by her ease. Hidden in the nearby forest, the traveler and the white tiger carefully observed that exchange. As they watched, Kylan rose again, and in his mind echoed only one word: Mama. The next day they arrived at the town of Hugh Dent. Klaus looked at one of its buildings and felt sincere gratitude for the help he had received. She returns to Princess Milia and notices her gloomy mood, and he cheers her up. "Don't be so sad, I will return." While he tries to calm him, the archer Shuya tightly squeezes his hand. Princess Milia, with tears in her eyes, asks why her father does not allow Shuya to cross the border with him, and Shuya interrupts, insisting that as a guardian he is obliged to protect both the holy beast and the Lord of Demons. He smiles warmly and immediately agrees. Of course. Princess Milia raises her eyes to him with a pleading look and asks him not to forget her. A blush spread across her face. She realized that she had already gotten used to his presence. Saying goodbye, the group heads through the city gates, and Princess Milia stays behind and waves her hand until they are no longer visible. Their path led out of the city into a dense, lush forest, and thanks to the kindness of Duke Sarek, they set out together with companions, riding giant adamantite creatures and the white tiger. As they rode, the swordswoman with braided braids informed Klaus that the Cloud family lives here and had stayed, then asked if everything was okay, because he seemed not to notice that they were in Woodville. She tells about Terald, a country that nature has gifted beyond measure. Here there is plenty of everything, so people live quite reclusively, rarely trading with others. He asks his companion whether they will be able to enter such a country at all, and the woman with the headband explains that it is difficult to get into Terald since the founding of Cynifolia. Only the most honorable house ducal and the keepers of the holy beasts had special permission to stay, and even the authority of the great saint cannot open the way for them. Nearby, Shia looks ahead, sensing that there are other problems worth considering. Following his gaze, they noticed their goal on the horizon, and a voice announced that they had reached Rienold. On the shore stand the sacred guardian and the holy beast Jinbu, together gazing across the water towards the mountainous island country. The boat glided over the water, and Klaus with his companions watched the approaching shore. Impatience was evident on their faces. He steps through the magnificent traditional gates, and his gaze stretches upward to the unique architecture of the city inside, while gentle petals quietly swirl in the air. Inside, a local man welcomes them and says that he has never seen such clothing before. Klaus and the woman with the headband admire the views, enchanted by the beautiful and unfamiliar city. Walking, he notices that the streets are almost entirely filled with men. A strange feeling flashed in his mind. He somehow does not want to walk ahead of another man. It seems their guide reads his unspoken thought and explains, as foreigners they are being closely watched. Two stern men stand nearby, observing. Their gazes are piercing. He was on edge and told Ursula that something was wrong in the city, especially concerning Selena. His companion, as if noticing nothing, cheerfully reported that they had found someone named Sakura. As if summoned by her name, a young woman in a floral kimono lifted her eyes from the stone path. Petals swirled around her, and she solemnly addressed him, Demon Lord Klaus Finley, introducing herself as the guardian of the Blue Dragon. He rushed to her side, urging her to stand and value her own life, and she, surprised by his concern, listened as he explained that he felt uncomfortable with such reverence and asked her to simply treat him as an equal. Moved by his kindness, she addressed him as a gentle sir. Then she politely introduced herself, Sakura Ferris, guardian of the holy beast. When she spoke, Klaus could not help but notice a slight resemblance to Jinbu and wondered if she was another guardian from a distant land. After the introductions, Ursula urged him to move on, and the group climbed the long stone stairs to the traditional estate, enclosed by a bamboo fence. They arrived at the house and soon settled on the open veranda, beginning a conversation with its inhabitants. During the conversation, Ursula asked Sakura if she had servants. She replied no. Klaus interrupted, noting that the town seemed to be filled only with men, and inquired why that was so. She explained that in Terald it was taken for granted. Men worked outside and women protected the home. It was precisely because of these strict social rules that women from foreign lands like her were considered outsiders. As she spoke, Ursula said that Sakura was an incredibly skilled guardian. He considered her the best choice for any outdoor work, and Klaus agreed, admitting that he and his companions could not endure the constant stares of the locals. A cup of steaming tea was placed before her, and she thought that in her country, women like Karen and Selena worked the same way, but here their work went unnoticed. Yet despite this, she greatly enjoyed the local tea. Her face lit up with a joyful smile, as if framed by the illusion of sakura blossoms. She said the tea was delicious and thought she could get used to it. A few steps away, Klaus and Karen watched her genuine happiness. He looked at her and realized, despite all her sternness, Sakura was strangely gentle. Sakura later confessed, although she had already gotten used to the customs of this country, it still hurt her that no one around noticed her efforts. Just as Ursula began to speak about the blue dragon, the ground shook with a dull thud. A huge dark-furred creature landed with incredible force right beside the veranda, frightening everyone. From the commotion appeared a man with long, spiky light hair and a broad smile. He called Sakura, said he had kept her waiting, and that it was time to go to the meeting with the demon lord. Sakura looked up in shock and exclaimed, "Rihaku, what are you doing here? I thought the reception was already over." In response, Rihaku spread magnificent feathered wings and apologized for being late. Klaus, stunned by this spectacle, began calling himself a representative of the Lord of Demons. He froze in surprise when the escort, bowing, introduced himself as Rihaku Gilburn, the first prince of the kingdom of Ringgold. Embarrassed, Klaus thanks him for the courtesy, and Rihaku smiles warmly and says it would be easier to speak less formally because he is used to it. While they stand, Sakura quietly offers to brew tea for Ahak. He lightly places her hand on his shoulder to attract his attention. In response, Rihaku turns to her with a warm, soothing smile and says, "Don't worry." And he asks if he can borrow a child. Rihaku and Sakura walk side by side, and Klaus watches them silently, wondering why the prince himself asked for such a thing. Later, the group gathered together and Ursula spoke about the oppressive danger. Under no circumstances should the blue dragon be awakened. He hoped to study Kailan's healing magic, but the chase for the creature had to be stopped, and Sakura added that because of the dragon's presence, people have been forbidden to enter the mountains for several days. Ursel announces that their group is setting out to find Kailan and will officially ask Klaus and his companions for cooperation. Klaus readily agrees. Ursel's face becomes serious and he raises an important question. Is their journey really a race against time? He looks up, a drop of sweat on his forehead, and hesitantly confirms Ursel's assessment. Accepting the answer, Ursel acknowledges the situation, apologizes, and says goodbye for today, then turns and leaves the room. As he departs, he thinks about how troubled this country is, while Klaus remains worried and wonders what just happened. At Rheindelden, Klaus sits in deep concentration, nearby a bouquet of flowers. His thoughts are consumed by one goal: to lift the Ouroboros curse, and he tirelessly contemplates a single healing spell, believing it will finally heal his sister Karen. He carefully plucked one flower from the bouquet, hope and apology mixed on his face. Thanks to training with Morris the Wizard, his control over magic has greatly improved, and he felt a surge of confidence. Perhaps now he will finally succeed, as a complex magical symbol materializes over the delicate flower. His thoughts drift to Karen. He imagines her weakened, hands entwined with the dark marks of her curse. He understands that this flower is the closest analog to her ailment, so, focusing, he channels magic into the stem, deliberately altering its wave to mimic the property of life draining, and the flower petrifies with a clear click. This experiment is the culmination of long hours spent studying texts. He studied the curse very carefully, noticing how it seems to clog the very vessels of life like a blockage in a blood vessel. Having completed the magical scan of the mutilated flower, he prepares for the next decisive step. Now he needs to pour his own healing magic into the cursed plant, a delicate and dangerous task, and a soft light begins to flicker in his palm. A bright flash of light burst from his hands as he unleashed his power. But he quickly realized how complex the task was. Simply flooding the flower with magic was not enough. It was necessary to extract and cleanse that sinister energy of the curse. The flower stubbornly remained stone-like, as proof of the difficulty of his task. Somewhere else, a magical communication device lies on a soft cushion, and through it Klaus's voice sounds unwavering and resolute. He will do it for Karen, relying on his own strength, not on Kailan. In her room, Karen clutches the device, anxiety on her face from the sudden silence, a sharp longing to see her brother burning in her heart, and a troubling thought flashed through her mind. If they were not bound by blood, would he still consider her his dear sister? A confused reaction over the connection struck Klaus, causing panic. He stared at the device and, voice full of anxiety, shouted apologies to Karen. In her room, Karen quickly recovered and explained that it was already late and she had fainted for a moment. Gently smiling, she recalled that she had said the same in childhood, sighed over her continuous busyness. 24 hours a day are simply not enough, and told how desperately she had worked to master healing magic. He laughed quietly, his voice sounding through the device, and admitted that he recalled her childhood wish to become his bride, thinking that the former Karen was so sincere and sweet. Hearing this, Karen puffed her cheeks in playful indignation and replied that she was no longer just sweet, she had grown up and become strong and beautiful. She quietly added, her cheeks flushed with a blush, then she belonged only to him. She, it seems, did not feel the weight of her words. She simply advised her not to overexert herself and wished her good night. Karen wanted to respond but faltered, the thought remaining unspoken. The connection was lost. Suddenly she twitched, her face flushed as his words reached her. What does this mean? She thought, burying her face in the pillow. A shocking thought blossomed in her mind. Was this his true intention? She tossed restlessly in bed, completely embarrassed. The thought that if she confessed her feelings, he might simply accept them without fuss gripped her and would not let go. She straightened abruptly. A new, urgent thought sounded in her head. Could it be that he did not even know they were not related by blood? The realization struck her with stunning force, and she had to find out for sure. Klaus explained to his comrades that although Kailan had not yet been found, his ability to fly made him an invaluable helper in the search. Ursel listened with a tired expression, while Alfred remained indifferent. As they made their way through the forest, Serafina announced their arrival, catching Klaus by surprise. Behind, Ursel told the others that the joining of the Blue Dragon would significantly expand the search area, and this idea was met with resolute agreement. The destination opens with an incredible waterfall cascading from a steep cliff. Serafina loudly admires the view. Klaus picks up her words and sadly says that he wished Karen could see it too. Hearing his words, Serafina turns to him and sees how deeply he cares about Karen. He smiles quietly and simply agrees sincerely. In a moment, stopping in a clearing, Kailan suddenly growled. He sensed an unfamiliar presence. Despite the pause, Klaus remained focused and declared that the blue dragon was nearby. His words were immediately confirmed when a majestic blue dragon burst out of the surrounding forest, a powerful and breathtaking sight. At the creature's appearance, Ursel stepped forward passionately and decisively declared that he would cast a spell to bring down the dragon. Klaus froze in anxiety. He did not feel hostility in the creature, only pure magical energy. Meanwhile, Kylan urgently called his master. Before he could react, Sakura and Rahako stepped between the group and the dragon. Rahako declared that they would be the bait. Sakura drew her sword, the blue dragon attacked. Serafina looked on in horror, fearing the damage even a single strike could cause. Klaus was frozen in shock, and Uroboros exclaimed that his magic was being neutralized and wondered if the dragon had gone mad. He watches as Sakura, with a fierce smile, releases a powerful sword technique she calls Absolute Sky. When she commands the blue dragon to fall to the ground, Rahaku soars in the air from above, approaching the beast. The force of the strike hurls the dragon through the sky and it screams in pain. Klaus freezes in awe, can't believe she wields such a massive sword so easily. Alfred shouts approval and Rahaku orders Jinbu to protect everyone on the ground. He realizes that his ability to shut down consciousness is useless because he cannot make direct contact with the dragon. He sees Sakura and Rahaku working in unison, luring the beast down from a great height, and nearby Alpha confirms this strategy. Seizing the opportunity, he urges the white tiger forward, shouts to move immediately, commands the beast not to take its eyes off the blue dragon, and loudly declares that they will stand against it together. The huge beast, as if in response, leaps into the air with a powerful jump. He stands firmly on its back, arms spread wide, preparing to make his move. But as he approached, the blue dragon let out a deafening roar and the force of the blast stunned him. He screamed, a magical mark flared on his hand and his consciousness slowly faded, plunging him into black darkness. The stunned white tiger rapidly falls from the sky, but even before hitting the ground, the blue dragon grabs it with powerful jaws, and below Alfred watches in horror and notes the audacity of the demon lord's power. The dragon's eyes remain empty. Alfred shouts that its consciousness has not returned, and to everyone's horror, the monster swallows the white tiger's entrance. Sakura calls Klaus in terror as she, Rahaku, and Jinbu witness this horror. Inside the beast's belly, Klaus finds himself surrounded by the corrupted magic of the blue dragon. He feels it is like a miasma he has encountered before and understands it must be cleansed quickly, apologizes for the pain he is about to cause, and decides to use his own power to forcibly restore the dragon's magic. Having made the decision, a shining symbol glows on his hand. After completing the scan of the dragon's energy, he cannot stop thinking about the voice that just sounded. With a determined cry, he releases the power. The forced restoration of magic instantly envelops the furious creature in dazzling light. The spell works instantly. The white tiger is harmlessly pushed out of the blue dragon's jaws, and the dragon itself, cleansed and radiant, calmly soars in the sky while Rahaku and others look on with disbelief and wonder if it has truly regained consciousness. Sitting on the calmed blue dragon, Klaus solemnly introduces himself as its new master and gently tells the creature that everything is all right and it is no longer alone, and the dragon looks at him with eyes full of tears of relief and gratitude. Overflowing with joy, the blue dragon gently pressed his nose against Klaus. He let him know that he had waited for him so long and had felt lonely since Uroboros was taken away. Klaus calmed the great beast, stroked his muzzle, and praised him for holding on for so long. The dragon continues to show tenderness, confidently confirming that Klaus is his master. Klaus calms him once again and wonders to himself how emotional this creature is and how different it is from its previous madness. He again wonders who was the voice that sounded just before he cast the spell. When they descended to the ground, Klaus turned to Sakura and enthusiastically said that her sword dance was beautiful. Embarrassed, Sakura blushed and insisted that it did not deserve praise, while nearby Rahaku watched them with an understanding smile. He returns to the gathered group Rihak, Sakura, Alfred, Serafina, and the sacred beasts and sincerely thanks them for their help. Then he approaches Rihak directly, and the partner recognizes him as Klaus Dono, reveals that he already knew about him, and says he has a request for him. He looked at Klaus with burning determination and asked if Klaus would join him to change this country. A sudden proposal stunned Klaus and he quickly asked Sakura to wait. She looked at Rahaku with disbelief as if questioning what he was saying. After a minute they sat opposite each other. Next to them rested a newly tamed blue dragon. Klaus admitted that the harsh rules and rigid worldview of the country weighed heavily on his heart. Rahaku listened carefully, then quietly remarked that Klaus, like a prince, had not yet absorbed the established customs of the peoples. Seeing this, Klaus made a decision. He stated that if Prince Rahaku really intended to perform, he was ready to fully cooperate, although he did not understand how they would manage it. Rahaku admitted that he had long tried to change something on his own and was now on the verge of defeat. His face turned to stone, revealed his true, radical plan. He wanted Klaus to join him and overthrow the current king of their country. With the image of a stern monarch in his mind, Rahaku resolutely declared that he would change the country at any cost. Rahak's thoughts converged on one treacherous goal: to kill the king. A silent statement hung in the air, and Sakura gasped, eyes wide open in disbelief. The shock is palpable, but Klaus steps forward to confront the prince. He firmly states that he cannot accept Sakura's position and demands to know why Rahaku is considering the rebellion, insisting that one can never get used to it. Turning around, Rahaku says with iron confidence that he had long felt something was deeply wrong with their country, and admits that his mother was shunned simply because she was a foreigner. Sakura was shocked. She blurted out a question: why Prince Rahaku and even Klaus are now involved in such a matter. Klaus, still digesting the news, asked why Rahaku would serve the princess if his own father disapproves of his mother. Rahaku's thoughts turned to his father, King Terald. He recalled that paternal pain. The king repeatedly begged his own mother to accept Rahaku, but all his pleas were rejected. Memories fade and the group falls silent. It seems they had already discussed that the government had not changed and that they asked Ouroboros and Klaus's squad to carry out the conquest mission. Rahaku clenches his fists, digging into the ground beneath him, and resolutely declares that for the sake of his mother and women like Sakura, he intends to stage a coup. He throws himself to the ground and bows his head low in deep submission. Realizing that his request is audacious, he still begs Klaus and his companions to help him change the country. Klaus, with a firm expression on his face, acknowledges the prince's determination and confirms that, as he had already said, he is ready to cooperate here. Hearing this, Rahaku's face lit up and he turned to his companions. Sakura Ferris promptly declared that with Prince Rahaku as the new king, they would gradually change the country, and Rahaku agreed but insisted. Action must be swift. He cannot stay here long, so the plan must be devised immediately. They gathered inside. He tells everyone that his voice no longer reaches his father the king, so he asks to borrow Klaus's authority, because he believes the king might listen to the words of the demon lords. Sakura calmly and without illusions says that if their request is rejected, they will have to fight the entire country and it will be a brutal battle for Klaus and his friends, and Rahaku agrees but reveals that they have a loophole. They looked into the distance, recognized their target, and named him the strongest general in the nation's history. Rahaku declares that he will defeat him with one decisive strike. Later that night, under a thin crescent moon, Klaus stands on the veranda and quietly reflects on how he agreed to this. Behind him, Ursula calls him, and Kylan leans on his shoulder. He explained his decision to Ursula. If he is asked to help as the Lord of Demons, then he must respond appropriately. Nearby, Rahaku added passionately that he cannot forgive a world where people are not truly recognized, and that Aizen's fall will break the armies fighting Spirit Alpha, and Ursula unanimously agreed, so this became the heart of their strategy. She listens. Sakura's eyes widen slightly, recalling the previous state of anxiety of the great saint and understanding the full seriousness of the situation. Rahaku watches as the blue dragon coils around Klaus's shoulders, thinking to himself that the young man has truly grown. Under the starry sky, someone invisible groans from trouble, asks where his boss is, and complains that the boss does not listen to him. What a tiring business this is. The scene suddenly breaks and we find ourselves before the huge structure of Naruto Castle, its multi-tiered form rising into the sky. The blue dragon rushes upward to it, now colossal in size, and Klaus confidently sits on its back. Below, a crowd of Taro soldiers points upward in disbelief, and someone shouts that this is the blue dragon and someone is riding it. The giant beast landed with a loud thud in the castle courtyard, raising clouds of dust and standing motionless before the stunned guards. Clenching his fist, he gathers determination. He must hold himself with dignity and grandeur. Stepping forward, he addressed the soldiers in a commanding voice and introduced himself. I am Klaus Finley. I have revived the frenzied blue dragon and have come because I must confirm something before the king. Guards part, whispers fill the air as he walks with unwavering determination through their ranks toward the main keys. He looks ahead with unwavering determination, his voice clear and resolute, a firm command for everyone to step aside. At his command, the Terral guards part, opening the way for him. He strides decisively through their ranks. He froze when a voice addressed him, and the speaker confirmed. As the great saint wrote in a letter, he had indeed verified the existence of demon emperors. A man in luxurious robes knelt before him, touching the sword's hilt, and introduced himself Isenkroud, a general serving the nation of Terrell. He looks down at the kneeling general and explains that he did not expect such a reception. He clarifies that his sole purpose is to gain an audience with the king. Isenkroud raises his gaze and assures him that everything is clear. He adds that he has already delivered the message to his lord and apologizes if anyone took it as rudeness. When the formalities ended, he lifted his eyes, stood up, and gestured toward the open castle doors, inviting Klaus to follow him, while the small blue dragon peeking over Klaus's shoulder watched with nervous excitement. Meanwhile, from afar, a group observes the events. Alfred, looking through a spyglass, smiles with relief and says that Klaus is safe, and nearby Shia Moeslin anxiously notes how extraordinarily conspicuous Klaus is. He peers at the distant castle and says that now it will be easier for them to act and outpace his father. Alpha then asks Shuya if he is ready to follow Prince Rahaku and adds that Klaus has already arrived at the castle, so they should send the signal. As the plans began to unfold, Sakura Ferris was absorbed in her thoughts. The image of a man from foreign lands surfaced in her memory. He loved his wife but simultaneously kept many other women. She decided she would not allow this to continue, just as Klaus had warned. Her determination met the equally grim will of Shuya. He said that although he hoped to support Prince Rahaku without bloodshed, if the king did not change, he would have to insist. Then he swore that when the time came, he would personally behead his father, and with these words, urged them to move. At that very moment, at the grand entrance of Reinald's castle, a guard's voice rang out, "The demon Emperor Klaus Finley has arrived." He was led down a long corridor into a huge reception hall, where at the very end, a solitary figure awaited him. The figure, a man with a noticeable topknot, stepped forward and smiled broadly, introducing himself as Usraba Kaka from the kingdom of Reinolds, then officially thanked Klaus for pacifying the holy beast. Usraba Kaka informed him that a banquet was arranged in his honor and invited him to rest a little, but Klaus refused. He did not need a banquet because he had to confirm something more important. His gaze passed over the assembled court and he asked a direct question. Did they know that Sakura Ferris, the guardian of the Blue Dragon, lived in conditions where she was unnoticed and uncared for? He concluded his speech before the Court of Tricks, stating that for a woman like Sakura, their current attitude to the situation was exactly the reaction one could expect from his country. In response, Ashurabikaka tries to convince him, saying that the important role of protecting her is essentially a man's business, and asks if Klaus, as the Lord of Demons, understands his fundamental principle. The arrogant words of the official sparked a flash of rage in Klaus's eyes, and with growing horror, he realized that his important companion was hidden just because she was a woman. Unmoved by his reaction, Usrabakaka continued without a shadow of doubt. This is simply a custom of their country that people have accepted, and then asked if Klaus really believed in it. Not listening to the official's excuses, with a bored expression, he turned his head and called a completely different name, Prince Rahaku. As if on command, the grand doors of the chamber opened, and Prince Rahaku appeared surrounded by his retinue, and Usrabakatka could not believe his eyes when the prince addressed him and announced that, as ordered, he had delivered the message of the Lord of Demons. He stepped forward and pushed a stack of documents. Rahaku said that here were testimonies and investigative reports about the attitude towards Sakura from her very arrival, as well as petitions from other women who wanted to work the court erupted, demanding evidence and rejecting these papers. The challenge shattered Usrabakaka's composure. He roared that women were obedient children, no better than cattle, and should stay at home and be silent. And Rahaku, hearing this, looked at his father with deep disappointment and sadly said what a disgrace this was. He raised his voice and his words echoed in the hall. He declared that after the removal of Usrabakatka, the first Prince Rahaka Gilvern would now ascend the throne and become the new king of Riddle. These words struck his father like a physical blow. Usraba's eyes widened, his face twisted in pure, uncontrollable rage. Sweat appeared. He could not comprehend the audacity of this coup. Shock recedes, explosive rage bursts forth in its place. "You are a disgrace," he growls, pointing with a trembling finger, and orders his royal guard to immediately seize the insolent invaders. By the king's command, the guards simultaneously draw their blades, the sharp clang of steel filling the air as they form a tight circle around Klaus, Rahaka, and their companions. Finding themselves surrounded by enemies, Klaus calmly but confidently addresses Rahak and says that since his father made the first move, he will take on the enemies in the castle. Rahak agrees to take care of the others, and they arrange to meet in the courtyard. When the plans were ready, Klaus loudly shouted the name Blue Dragon and ordered all allied soldiers to immediately descend into the courtyard. The gigantic beast instantly responded to its master's call and burst into the throne room, scattering the guards and throwing the entire courtyard into chaos, while Rahaka watched in admiration. The blue dragon breaks through the building's facade and Klaus and Rahako jump onto its back. Asraba Katka shouts for them to wait, but they are already airborne, leaving destruction and uprising behind. In the new, unfamiliar courtyard, Klaus summons his allies, shouting the names of two sacred beasts, Jinbu and Bayako behind him. A huge white dragon curled up in a ball, and a majestic white tiger stands ready, both appearing before a line of armed soldiers. All the power of his companions was revealed when the colossal turtle Jinbu joined them. Serafina sat on the white tiger Bayako. The assembled group faced the soldiers smeared with tar, who could only freeze and silently watch this display of power. Among the soldiers, a bearded man named Eisenkraut steps forward, a strained smile appearing on his face. He says he never imagined seeing such a thing in his lifetime. Klaus looks around anxiously, a drop of sweat shining on his forehead, realizing the situation is far from simple. Eisen's face grew sterner as he introduced himself as the shogun of the national army and said that as shogun he cannot simply stand aside. Addressing Klaus directly, Klaus responded by raising a glowing magical emblem that displayed the names of his skills Limit Break and Divine Awakening. With a firm gaze, Eisen casually requests a duel to test Klaus's strength. His resolve hardens, and Klaus looks him in the eyes and declares that he accepts the challenge. In the large courtyard, the duel begins. Klaus and Eisenkraut stand opposite each other, surrounded by herald soldiers, and Eisen smiles boldly. He is confident that with the demonic emperor on their side, victory is guaranteed. Suddenly Klaus shouted loudly, looking with wide-open eyes in surprise. Eisen tells him to stop staring and get to work. In the background, the sounds of guards sparring echo. Eisen apologizes, admitting he is too nervous to stay calm, and Klaus quietly agrees, saying he feels the same. He loudly laughs at Klaus's manner of speaking and declares that if Klaus follows his example, victory will be theirs. He continues, noting that Klaus seems shy, but it doesn't matter from now on. He says they are comrades. Klaus looks, slightly stunned by the man's turbulent energy. Then he asks if Klaus has a weapon. Klaus replies that he himself is the weapon. Interested, Eisen wonders if he is a martial arts master or a sorcerer and suggests fighting barehanded, just the two of them. Without a word, he glanced around and rushed forward, swinging the wooden training sword that struck with incredible force and completely caught Klaus by surprise. Klaus dodges with incredible speed. The wooden sword breaks against the ground and he precisely catches a splinter right in the air. Everyone watches with admiration, and Klaus realizes that the opponent has already noticed the secret on his palm. He is not a sorcerer. He is trying hard to find a breach, but the opponent continuously swings a wooden sword, forcing him to keep his distance. The wooden blade cuts the air. Eisen asks why he does not use magic. The question catches Klaus off guard, and he instantly realizes Eisen is deliberately trying to prevent him from casting any spell. He barely had time to react when the flat part of the blade struck him right in the back. The blow stunned him, and he realized with shock that he was cut and bleeding. He clutches his chest, amazed by the incredible speed of his recovery. The deep wound has already closed, but despite this advantage, he understands there is no clear rhythm in Eisen's attacks that can be exploited. The opponent notices the rapid healing, glances with a mocking smile, observes how quickly he recovered, admits that fighting while healing must be difficult, and presses even harder. He realizes that pushing the body to the limit during recovery means breaking it. The fight must end before he takes more wounds. A magical sign barely glows over his chest as he prepares his next move. Dodging another powerful strike, Eisen sighs again and says how hard it is for him. While Klaus, unafraid, places his hand on the ground, a complex magic circle unfolds under his palm, and he announces his next attack. Eisen, he is faster. He unleashes destructive technology, the strike of the thunder god, a powerful blow soaked with lightning. At that very moment, Klaus's own spell activates, bursting into a huge wall of pointed eyes that meets the electrified strike head-on. When the battle of lightning and ice subsides, Klaus sharply strikes the ground with his hand. A magical sign glows brightly, and he casts the spell Blood of Absolute Zero, causing the moisture in the soil to freeze instantly. The spell works instantly. Eisen looks down in surprise and sees that his feet are surrounded by sharp, jagged ice holding him captive. He realizes he was caught at the very moment Klaus lunged forward. He instantly closes the distance. A bullet of crackling magical energy flashes in his open palm, and when the target freezes, he claims he made it in time. He thrusts the sphere of power straight into Eisen's chest. The force of the blow is colossal, and through clenched teeth Klaus confirms that his opponent has lost consciousness. The blow threw Eisen back onto the dusty ground, his sword clanged nearby. Klaus stood over him, gasping from exertion. The victory was his. From Sakura Ferris's side, she looks stunned and cannot believe what she sees. She mumbles both phrases and generalizes the names, unable to comprehend that the duel ended exactly like that. Shock ran through the soldiers, but they rise, unwilling to surrender, proudly calling themselves Reynolds' men and swearing to fight to the last. Klaus sharply interrupts them with a shout, demands they stop, and warns that they cannot withstand the white tigers. His words broke off. Eisen sat down, grabbed his head, and complained of a headache. Klaus froze, stunned, unable to believe what kind of person could recover so quickly on their own. He looks with distrust when Eisenkraut appears before him, seemingly fully restored. The warrior turns his back and says he has lost the will to continue the fight. He sighed, looked at the opponent fallen on the ground, and admitted that the difference in their strength was absolute. Nearby Sakura looked at him with a worried expression. Turning his gaze back to the opponent, he politely asks and orders his soldiers to stop the attack to resolve everything peacefully. House fell silent, stunned by the sudden turn of events. The little white tiger nearby confirmed that they were completely unharmed. A grateful expression flashed across Eisen's face. He thanked them, then began to explain the true goal of the Demon Emperor: to transform Terald into a peaceful country. These words struck Klaus. He recalled that this whole conflict began with Rihaku's desire to change the country for the better for its people. Gazen's expression becomes thoughtful as he continues. He is confident the prince who could move the Demon Emperor would surely create a wonderful country. Having made a decision, he turns to the gathered soldiers of Teralt, raises his hand, and loudly proclaims before all the people of Linalt a vow of loyalty to Prince Rihaku, recognizing him as the new king. He knelt down in the grass and swore an oath. Before Klaus, he solemnly named himself Eisenkraut, swore by his own life, and pledged loyalty to him. Law, stunned, asked if he was really sure. Eisen confirmed this with a calm smile, and his words spread as a whisper of shock among the crowd. Then he shifted attention to the next task and, full of determination, explained that now they needed to win the hearts of the soldiers, after which he officially asked Klaus to lend his strength to Prince Rihaku. Meanwhile, Prince Rihaku trained himself with fierce determination. His blade flashed, cutting through one wooden target after another in a wild whirl of movements. He exhausted himself to the last, feeling that he was on the edge but still resolutely moved forward. He was driven by memories of his deceased parents and a sincere desire to change the country for the sake of the people. A sharp voice interrupted his thoughts. Usraba Kaka shouted, demanding silence, stated that the Guardian's affairs had nothing to do with this, and mockingly added that for a woman from Xenofolia, just hiding was pathetic. He threw sharp words at Rihaku, asking if he truly realized the enormous responsibility of a guardian. Then his gaze fell on Sakura. He recognized her as a member of the most beautiful Dukel house of Xenofolia, one of the 4 great Dukel houses, and noticed the powerful divine protection of a great saint accompanying her. Rihaku turns to Sakura with a grim face and says that if they fail now, they will definitely be expelled as incapable kings. Sakura lowers her gaze and admits that she did not know how serious everything was because no one had ever told her about it. Then his attention shifts to Usraba Kaka. Rihaku says he does not expect forgiveness but will resolutely defend Sakura, even if he has to borrow strength from Klaus, and Usraba Kaka's face distorts with rage as he sharply replies that this is exactly why Rihaku cannot be forgiven. Uttering a guttural curse, he draws a sinisterly curved blade, its polished surface gleaming as he swings it forward. He presses the cold steel to Rihaku's throat, his eyes burning with rage. He growls that Rihaku's mistake was to trust him and allow him to live, and Rihaku meets his gaze without flinching. Without flinching, Rihaku quietly utters one heavy apology. He froze, completely still, accepting the threat as Roba Kaka loomed over him, the blade a constant, deadly pressure. Suddenly his calm was shattered by a memory, the image of his mother, her warm, smiling face looking at him when he was still a child. The memory strengthens his resolve. Sakura looks on anxiously, and determination flames again in Rihaku's eyes. He silently makes an absolute vow: he will protect this country. He did not flinch when Usraba Kaka, with a furious cry, swung the blade. The blade sliced through the air, leaving an icy mist, but Rihaku's gaze was calm. His resolve did not waver. In sudden darkness echoed a dull, damp blow. It was the consequence of his determination. Snow quietly falls above the tall pagoda. A firework blooms, a signal that the conflict has ended. On the balcony below, Eisencrowd cannot hide his amazement at the ice magic he sees, and Klaus quietly contemplates the words of Prince Rahaku. He shows another power, casting an additional healing spell that flashes like a brilliant, complex symbol, and Eisencrowd stands, unable to believe his eyes, realizing he is witnessing the true might of the Demon Lord, for the blue dragon, previously covered in ice, begins to thaw. Next to him sits the tiny companion Jinbu. He turns his gaze to the others and politely asks General Aizen and Sakura to accompany him. At the highest step of a pagoda, the group holds their breath, watching as the now healed blue dragon freely rises into the sky. Far below, inside the building, Asurabikaka is still on his knees on the floor, defeated. The crisis has just been averted. Eisencrowd turned to Prince Rahaku with a grim expression and directly asked if the prince was the one who overthrew the king. Haku admits that he was convinced by the Demon Lord. He finally saw that the king no longer cared about the country and apologizes for not saying this earlier. Lying on the floor, a robber named Kaka speaks with sad submission. He admits that his mother taught him both ice magic and swordsmanship, but says he was unlucky he encountered the refined skills of someone he could not match. Determination hardened within him, Rihaka places his hand on his heart and swears that from now on he will change the country. Klaus, looking at him, confirms his loyalty. As long as the prince's feelings do not change, his own will not change either. Eisencrowd firmly shakes Rahaku's hand, an iron determination on his face. Rahaku says that for the future of the country, Eisen must follow him and become King Rahaku, and without any hesitation, Eisen agrees. He shifts his gaze to Klaus and Sakura, asking them to hear his wishes regarding the soldiers. Klaus, with a neutral expression, looks at him and asks what he intends to do now. Rahaku admits to Aizen that changing the entrenched mindset of the people will be difficult, and Aizen agrees it will definitely be a long and exhausting path. Despite the difficulties, Sakura suddenly turns around, her voice firm. She insists that they have no other choice but to do it, and Rahaku calls her by name, surprised by her resolute remark. Determination seems to ignite Rahaku. He looks at her, his voice burning with passion, and asks, "Will you stay close to help create a nation where everyone can live freely?" But watching this scene, Klaus smiles brightly, says that his path has finally ended and sincerely thanks, and Rahaku responds with a deep bow of gratitude. Then Taku takes Klaus by the hand and sincerely promises to build a country where he can live freely, only asking to wait for that day, and the whole group froze and watched as this promise was made. He raised his eyes to the sky and a quiet realization flashed across his face. Now the future of the new nation lay on their shoulders. He did everything he could. When the blue dragon rose into the sky and flew away from the magnificent Terrelled pagoda, he was overwhelmed by the feeling that this was the end. From the streets below, our robberos watched them leave and told the others that it was a magnificent battle. As the group walked on, Alpha noticed that Klaus was especially impressive. She agreed and added that Klaus seemed to be moving even better than during their sparring. Klaus, overhearing them, simply said it was nice to hear. His little dragon on his shoulder suddenly spoke, addressing him as master, and asked for praise for its hard work. He smiled quietly and gently stroked the creature's head, but as soon as he did, the familiar's form began to crack and disintegrate, its body dissolving into particles of light. On the other hand, a dark crystalline object pulsed. A sudden dissolution stunned his companions, and Alfred and Shia shouted his name in fright. An explosion of energy burst through Klaus and pushed him back, but instead of falling, he landed precisely on the back of the now full-sized blue dragon that appeared in a flash. He looked at his hands, a smile of delight playing on his face. Elsewhere, a young woman named Luna held a similar crystal, her eyes burning with anxiety. Before her and another woman, Nina, appeared a vision of a blue dragon with a rider, and Luna explained that this was a memory of their sacred beasts after the death of a man named Cecil, begging Nina to remember. In the memory, a man named Cecil froze in disbelief when he realized that Luna and Nina were the daughters of him and Marin and how much they had grown. His surprise turned to horror when he saw the sacred beast Kylan writhing in agony, corrupted by the dark influence of Ouroboros, and he cried out its name in despair. Luna said they had no choice, they had to act instead of their father, and then asked the question hanging in the air. "Cecil is dead, isn't he?" Before he could comprehend this, Nina grimly and decisively declared that Luna must now become the next great saint of Cynofolia. Then he understood. The parents would never be told that the world of Ouroboros had Brocanthes was their duty, a role passed to the next generation to seal Ouroboros from inside their mother, and the burden of this inherited mission fell upon him. Nina begged her sister to convey their love to her future husband and children, but Luna shouted in protest, refusing the title of Great Saint. Overwhelmed with emotion, she called her elder sister, her voice sobbing with pain. Reeling in despair, the corrupted Kylan lunged forward, his body twisted by dark energy, while Mina still called for her sister, her voice a desperate plea. In response to the attack, Luna did not retreat. She resolutely pressed her hand to the beast's head and unleashed a powerful Techniqueth Eternal Seal. The seal worked, the fading magic receded from the defiled creature, and it began to dissolve. From the remnants of its essence, Luna with her own power gave birth to a new, purified Kylan, small and flawless. The vision-shattered Klaus suddenly woke up in bed, gasping for air. He looked at the wooden ceiling, and that vivid image still echoed in his mind. At the foot of the bed, his little dragon slept peacefully, undisturbed. He wakes to the chirping of birds, opens his eyes in a soft bed, sunlight pouring through the window. He realizes it is already morning and that his companions must have brought him here. Looking around, he sees his little companions Kylan, Ouroboros, and the little dragon, dozing on the blankets beside him, and when a pitcher with water is placed on the nightstand, he quietly whispers to them all thank you. He swallows water, his mind racing, a drop of sweat trickling down his forehead. He tries to comprehend the overwhelming flood of information that surged to him in dreams. His thoughts again returned to the vision of Luna. Now he understood. The current Kylan was not Morin's first companion. Instead, it turned out that he was the heir who received the magic to wield the sacred sword just like Luna. Truth was completely different from what he had been told. The memory of the daughters standing before the distorted beast reinforced the bitter realization. The power of the Ouroboros was too immense. Even with Kylan, they could never seal it forever. This generational duty was not a heroic mission. It was an unending cycle of human sacrifices. He clenches his teeth and understands this terrible cycle. Every time the Ouroboros resurrected, the saints had to seal it again, falling in battle, and the next generation took their place. They were destined to fall again and again, but they never gave up. The name Ouroboros echoes in his head, filled with new hatred. His hand clenches into a fist, fierce determination burns in his eyes. He swears that he will finally defeat it, and suddenly his thoughts surface into the present with one question. How much does Selena know? He doubts her motives. Did Selena know about his past when she asked him to help find Kylan? He wonders if her mother was also a saint who fell into the same tragic cycle. The burden of his past memories of Luna and the true Kylan weighs on him. He runs out of the room. The revelation about Kylan still echoes in his mind. With an urgent need for answers, he rushes down the corridor, knocks sharply on the door, and calls, "Selena." But the room is empty. Instead, Selena stands somewhere else, silently in the middle of a dense forest from where the town and the nearby shore are visible. You find her there, shouting her name as he rushes through the trees, and Selena turns to him with a knowing smile, tells him to keep his eyes open, confirms that he has finally awakened, and at that very moment, a small round device in her hand clicks shut. Somewhere far away, a similar device begins to ring, and Karen Finley stands on a sunny street. Her face fills with anxiety as she looks at the communicator in her hands. The device continues to beep on the nightstand next to the empty, neatly made bed. Holding it, Karen asks aloud why her brother still hasn't woken up. She clutches the communicator to her chest, her eyes closed in a quiet wish. She so longs to see him, her beloved Klaus, and the time until their meeting is relentlessly approaching. Fowl sharply turned to his companions, his voice sharp with impatience. We are not going back. The Cinifolia forest, which we will have to pass through, is already close to rental, and he dismissed their concerns about the magical teleportation device, assuring that he would handle it by force. The path through the forest led them to a clearing, and there unexpectedly opened a stunning spectacle: ancient stone ruins, half swallowed by twisted roots of huge trees. The men froze, not understanding what place it was, and one of them simply whispered, "Ruins." They can scout further. From the undergrowth emerge two wolf-like beasts with spiky crests on their backs. Their growls echo across the clearing. Unfazed, Fowl turns to them with an irritated look, as if asking if they really intend to challenge him. Giving them no chance to respond, Fowl screams and unleashes a tornado flame, a fierce whirlwind that devours the beasts and tears trees and soil from the ground. The powerful vortex strikes directly into the ancient ruins and destroys them with devastating force, while his companions, standing at a safe distance, can only watch as the stone entrance begins to crack and crumble under this magical pressure. The stone shifts and a palpable, ominous presence covers the clearing. Fowl breaks out in a cold sweat, his eyes wide open from growing horror. He recognizes this feeling as deep evil, an aura he has never felt before, and his companions share his fear and freeze in place. Their fear was instantly confirmed. From the broken doors burst a stream of pure dark energy that shook the ground beneath their feet. "Run!" Disgusting growl. and the three men turned and desperately rushed into the safe shadow of the trees. Away from the chaos in the forest, Serafina sits by Klaus's bed and gently asks where his mother is. Klaus, with pain on his face, admits that the parents are no longer alive because of his own weakness. He clenches his fist, his voice heavy with remorse, explaining that their sacrifice now forces him to move forward. Serafina spoke words of gratitude, relieved to realize that it was he who diagnosed her, but her thoughts were already drawn to something much more important. In the chest secretly gathered was the power of Kailan, which she had not managed to securely hide in time for the native land. Her face hardened with determination. She loudly declared that she would use her scales and help so that Karen would receive them, naming her own name, Selena, as if cementing her intention. Hearing this, Klaus rushed to her through the forest, eyes wide open from growing horror, and shouted, demanding to know who Kailan really was because he suspected a terrible truth. She turned to him with a grim face and confirmed his worst fears. He had indeed figured it all out. Kailan's true form was the embodiment of successive generations of saints. She explained that the saints gave their own bodies to seal the demonic Lord Ouroboros, and Kailan was the result of that supreme sacrifice. This revelation stunned Klaus and left him speechless. With a heavy heart, she confessed that she also intended to take the same path. A gloomy silence fell between them, and they silently continued walking through the forest. Suddenly, he stopped her, desperately grabbing her hand, and reminded her that he was the one who chose to save her and would not allow her to lose her life as his father did. He demanded to know if she had any idea of the pain of those left behind. His words shook her, but her determination only grew stronger. She resolutely replied that she had no obligation to be a support for others and that Karen would never have wanted that, and her voice, filled with emotion, rose as she declared. Her only true desire was for Karen to become his real family, and she would achieve this no matter the cost. His hand still gripped hers, but his attention was distracted as the world began to tremble fiercely. A huge, dark, cross-shaped structure burst from the ground, throwing Klaus and Serafina off balance, and he shouted her name. When the trembling subsided, Serafina sharply whistled in the distance. A colossal pillar of black energy shot into the sky, and below Klaus and his companion stood frozen in shock, calling both Serafina and Karen. Their screams burst out in terror. Somewhere another young woman sounded the alarm. A rocky texture quickly spread over her hands. Petrification was advancing too fast, and seeing that distant dark energy, Klaus shouted Serafina's name, realizing with horror that he would not be able to stop what she had planned. He reached out, shouting for her to wait, but suddenly a powerful circular wave of energy erupted from where she stood and knocked him back into the air. As he was thrown, one burning question flickered in his mind. Was it right to lose Serafina just to heal Karen? He clenched his fist in the air, his resolve hardened. He refused to accept such a choice. He would save them both. Meanwhile, Serafina stood before her companions and explained that Kailan had maintained the barrier for generations, but now its resilience was faltering. She turned to them with a calm smile, thanked them for everything, gave the final order to abandon Kailan, and rushed to deliver him to Karen and Klaus. While she spoke, a mythical beast appeared, now shrouded in ominous black flames. Somewhere far away, Klaus burst through the door, shouting Karen's name. He found her collapsed on the stone floor, groaning. The strange, scaly pattern of her curse had spread even higher up her arms and legs. Karen's consciousness was fading. She struggled with the pain, and Klaus leaned over her, desperately trying to make her recognize him. He saw her awareness slipping away and pleaded for her to hold on, telling her to endure what was to come. He places his hand on her chest, and before them materializes a glowing magic circle. Karen screams in pain as the energy flows into her. He, frightened, watches as the power of the blue dragon is drawn into her at an alarming pace. Suddenly, a powerful shockwave of dark energy exploded nearby, shaking the ground beneath their feet. He and Serafina turn with horror toward the source of the explosion. Before them stand two monstrous shadow beasts wrapped in black flames, and Serafina utters one frightened word, Ouroboros. When the distorted Kailan roars, Serafina's face hardens with grim determination. She clenches her teeth and aloud asks how much longer Ouroboros intends to torment them. Her thoughts drift to the memory of the grassy field. She calls her mother, and sadness is heard in her voice as she confesses how long and hard it has been for her to be alone. Standing on the back of a huge monster, she remembers how Mom believed that Klaus would save Karen and the whole world, once dreamed of that peace, but now clenches her fists and throws my turn to act. Her little dragon helper appeared and warned her not to be reckless. There was almost no time left. Ignoring the pleas, Serafina silently asks Klaus to hold on a little longer. As her world fades into darkness, Karen's last thought is bitter regret. She wanted to marry Klaus. She raises her eyes to Klaus, her voice weak but firm, and asks him to be happy. His eyes widen in despair, and he exclaims that he would do anything for Hirvan marry her. He firmly grasps her hand in his palms, but she gently pulls it away. A complex magical symbol begins to glow brightly on her open palm. Their eyes widen as they both felt the shock of a sudden surge of power together. "I will save you now," Klaus shouts, his voice filled with new hope. Meanwhile, Seraphina directs her mighty power. Dark, feather-like energy explodes around her. She raises the glowing artifact upward and summons the eternal seal. The effect works instantly. Blinding light engulfs Klaus and Karen as she initiates the forced restoration of magical energy. With grim determination, she pours her life force into the spell, ready to risk everything for the people dearest to her. Klaus holds his sister, his face twisted with despair. He shouts for her to live. Dazzling light bursts from his hand as he presses her hand to his chest, invoking a powerful ability, forced magic restoration. His eyes open wide as another voice echoes in his head, a memory that is not his. He sees Seraphina ordering Raktius to pull himself together, asking why Lumiel acts this way, and saying that they are an obstacle and must be driven from the sacred land into the demon world. He staggered from the foreign memory, his head buzzing, his mind racing to comprehend what he had just seen. Looking down at the motionless Karen, he wonders whose memory it could have been. He kneels over her, and dark, miasmatic energy is drawn from her body, dissolving into the void right before his eyes. The ominous pattern on Karen's chest has completely disappeared. She moaned softly, and Klaus shouted her name, disbelief in his voice. Her eyes slowly open, confused. She raises her gaze, recognizes her brother, and whispers his name as if asking. Relief surged. He grabbed her in a desperate embrace, tears of joy rolling down his face, calling her name. He had managed to heal her. She responded to his embrace, her own tears streaming down her cheeks. She whispered that everything was fine because she believed he would heal her, apologized for making him worry, and confessed that he was the best older brother. She whispered, eyes closed, with a faint blush on her cheeks, that she wanted to marry Klaus. He froze, stunned, his face reddened, and he could not comprehend whether these were her true feelings. Shock recedes, sharp panic sets in. He turns to the swordswoman with the braided braid and shouts that he must tell everyone Selena is risking her life to seal Kailan and save Karen. The swordswoman grabs his hand and begs him not to go, but he breaks free and demands what she means. Pulling back, he insists that he must go and stop her, explaining that although Karen's curse is lifted, that is not enough. Seeing his unwavering determination, the swordswoman's face softens. She reluctantly agrees, and with her consent, Klaus raises his fist, calls Ronald's name, and initiates the transmission. Somewhere in the forest where sunspots play on the leaves, Seraphina with two guards encounter the mythical beast Kailan. Behind their backs appears a huge shadow creature. Its presence is overwhelming, and when Seraphina asks why they are here, one of the guards desperately exclaims that sealing the beast is impossible. The shadow creature loomed over her, but Seraphina addressed it calmly. She said she saw a black fog that seemed to interfere with the seal. Her words ignited a terrible realization in the guards. They understood that she was trying to take the power of Ouroboros from him. Just at that moment, Klaus and the swordswoman with a braided braid appear, and he calls Selena. The sudden appearance alarmed the swordswoman. She looked at him confused, not understanding why he was here and why he called her Karen. Klaus ignored it and rushed past to Seraphina, exclaiming with relief that he arrived just in time. He appears just in time, calming the stunned Seraphina, saying he healed her and now everything is fine. She quietly thanks him, but looking at Karen, firmly grabs the swordswoman's hand. In response, Karen sharply turns around, her voice sharp with anger and anxiety. She calls Seraphina a fool, reproaching her for always giving her body away, and strictly forbids her from doing it again. She grabs Seraphina by the shoulders, with pain on her face, says she will never forgive such a reckless act, and Seraphina only looks back, embarrassed and apologetic. The anger melts and she tightly hugs Seraphina. Although she was still scolding her, she whispered a sincere thank you and confessed how much she loves her. Meanwhile, Seraphina's guards look at Klaus for answers. One tensely asks what is happening, noticing that Seraphina's seal is not working, and another already points to the cause. The black fog of Ouroboros interferes and makes it impossible to complete her ritual. Taking command, Klaus orders the guards to continue controlling the barrier's movement, then entrusts Seraphina to protect Karen, and Karen is to restrain the mythical beast Kailan inside that very barrier. All agree. Karen instantly ignited her dance of the burning sword. The blade was engulfed in flames, and she rushed towards the beast. Klaus, watching, happily notes that she has fully recovered and fights effectively. When the immediate threat was subdued, his gaze fell on the mighty Kailan, and a new determination hardened on his face. He silently vows to save this creature as well. He watches fearfully as Seraphina and Karen launch attacks into battle, from which the mythical Kailan dodges lethally, and suddenly he realizes with surprise that the creature is not just avoiding blows, it is actively seeking a weak spot in the barrier they created. The beast finds what it was looking for and breaks the barrier with a powerful strike. Klaus cries out its name in despair. It seems his plea was heard. 3 more sacred beasts appear in the sky above, the white tiger, Genbu, and the blue dragon, and with new hope he calls everyone. In response, the blue dragon lets out a powerful roar that spreads across the entire field. Seizing the moment, Klaus places his hand on Kailan. A glowing magical symbol flares on his palm, and he begins to scan, feeling that the beast's consciousness is already fading and sinking into darkness. The connection abruptly broke and Kailan fell, pushed back and stumbling. Karen and Seraphina noticed that the beast lost consciousness, and when he began to regain it, Klaus realized with shock that the flow of magic in Kailan was completely different from what he felt in Karen. Dark aura flares around the unconscious Kailan, and his power begins forced and cruel restoration. He froze, unable to move, and noticed a clear resemblance between Kailan and the blue dragon. Seraphina asks what to do. Then the blue dragon addresses Klaus directly, hinting that the master's powers might not be enough, possibly due to his weak training. He listened as the blue dragon explained that something was wrong. Kailan's magic was probably incomplete. The white tiger intervened and said that once Kailan's memory returns, his power will become perfect, and nearby Karen begged him to go and save that beast. Meanwhile, Seraphina knelt beside the others near Kailan, her face full of anxiety. She decided not to let her mother see the sacred beast in such a weakened state. Her thoughts were interrupted by Klaus's voice. He said her name, his fist clenched with determination as he said that he himself would end this curse. He turned to his companions and with a firm voice announced that he was heading to the city of Thousandless. Seraphina's guards immediately promised to go with him, and Karen insisted that she would go too. Then Klaus addressed the sacred beasts and entrusted them to take care of Kailan. The blue dragon entrusted Jinbu and the white tiger to sort things out there, and the tiger nodded in understanding, while Klaus and Karen behind his back called the dragon to wait for him as it began to rise. Far away across the boundless desert, the city of Thousandless towered on the horizon, and a majestic fiery creature was rising towards it, a crimson bird. Below on the ground, Alfred and Shia watched anxiously as it approached. Alfred whispered about its incredible size, a drop of sweat trickling down his temple. He recognized it as Suzaku, the last of the sacred beasts, and aloud wondered why it had finally appeared in their city. He remembered that Klaus's squad had gone to a similar place, and the anxiety grew. Seraphina was out of contact, and reports of Siku's sudden rampage only fueled the fear. He turned to Shua and asked what to do next. He and Shia watched as a broad-shouldered man named Rucky stood before them. Another, with dark hair, announced their goal: they would become a living shield and hold out until the demon emperor arrived. Rucky charged into attack, aimed his spear at the giant, spotted figure of the crimson bird, and swore to protect this land with his life. Below, amid the whirl of battle, Klaus and Karen rode their small dragon. Their mission was clear: release the last sacred beast.